Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's council meeting. For those who may be attempting to watch the live stream, you're probably not hearing this, but we are having some difficulties with the live stream. However, Rogers Television is here, and Rogers is recording the meeting, and it will be available tomorrow at some point on the website. But we are having some issues with the live streaming this evening, so apologies for that. Welcome everyone to tonight's council meeting, and if I can invite everyone to stand as they're able for the singing of our national anthem. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been moved by Councillor Johnson that the minutes of the regular meeting held April the 1st, 2019, the special meetings held April 1st and 15th, 2019, as mailed to the mayor and councillors be accepted. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Benwick. As outlined in the planning committee, my parents own property beside 100 Victoria, so I would have a conflict on the Crosby section of that committee.
So all of Crosby, or are you just pulling out certain sections?
For the downtown, it would be, I guess, 120 meters from that. Changes to any properties from that address.
Okay. So thank you. And Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I have the same conflict of interest as Councillor Singh. My family owns property at the 100 Victoria address, so I have a conflict just with properties 120 meters surrounding that property.
Okay. So if you can just indicate at the time which clauses you'd like me to deal with differently, so that I can accommodate your vote appropriately. Okay. In terms of communications referred to file, you'll note that there is a flag request from the Eritrean Canadian community. So we'll just take that as being referred. And we'll now move into presentations. I think we all received an email earlier today, and today we'll be hearing from the core organizations, institutions that we fund from an arts and culture point of view. Excuse me. I will perhaps have you collectively do your presentations, and then if there's any questions, we'll take them at the end of the collective presentation. And so we'll start with Denis Longchamp, from the Executive Director of the Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery, followed by Shirley Medill, the Executive Director of Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery, Andrew Bennett, the Executive Director of the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony, and David Marskell, the Executive Director of the Museum, to present an overview of their recent successes and upcoming initiatives for each of their institutions. Denis.
Good evening. So, is that working?
There you go.
Okay. Here we go. So when I started at the Clay and Glass in August 2018, I did a survey of the people, a survey of what we did well, a survey of what we didn't do so well, and started to make some change at that point. So we didn't have a family corner in the gallery. Now we do. We installed some tables, and there's benches for kids to sit down and draw. Adults can read about the artists that we present in the various exhibitions. And eventually we want to move into doing a family guide that will be for each exhibition that we're presenting. We also have a great courtyard that was not used before, so we cleaned it up and we got a $15,000 sponsorship that will allow us to put a gate so that we can close it completely from outside and use it as an exhibition space. Junie Kim, who has work on the photo there, will be the first artist to engage with the courtyard this summer. There was also the Ann Roberts Archival Center that was never developed fully. The room was used as a boardroom, so now we're reinstating the archives because we do collect archives from artists as well as from our own institution. So that's in the process of happening. We had a big lobby. We decided to take half of it and turn it into an exhibition space. Right now we're presenting the School of Architecture student project on 3D printing with clay. We changed the way we do business with the gallery shop, and already it's bearing some fruits. Our sales are going up. And the Tower Gallery, which is the smallest gallery of the institution, we decided to devote it to emerging artists in the region and emerging curators in the region, mostly from underrepresented and marginalized groups. All that to bring us to stable financial sustainability, stronger community engagement, stronger exhibition programs. We're planning right now for a 3-year plan, and new programs for emerging artists and emerging curators starting in September 2019 to support the local artists and artists in clay and glass, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denis. And welcome, Shirley. After a successful opening of our youth art exhibit on the weekend.
Thank you. And thank you for attending, Mayor Verbenovic and councillors. So it's my pleasure to give you a brief update on the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery and several accomplishments. And I always start with our mission, which is connecting people and ideas through art with the best of contemporary culture. I always put that first. Our staff, our team actually looks at this every day. And we're on the last 2 years of a strategic plan. These are the 5 priorities, and we've been making significant progress on many of them. I'm actually going to start with the peer jury statement that was given by the Ontario Arts Council when we had our multi-year programming application in. This statement also resulted in putting us at the top 6% of the Ontario Art Galleries receiving that funding, and it also resulted in a 20% increase in our allocation from the Ontario Arts Council. We're really proud of several other awards we received this past year. We won the Ontario Association of Art Galleries Exhibition Award for Maggie Grote exhibition. There was honourable mention for 2 publications. I received a letter from Premier Doug Ford a couple of weeks ago informing us that we were one of 5 finalists in the Premier's Award for Excellence. It's a really fierce competition. Although we did not win, Imaginative in Toronto did. We were pretty jazzed about being on the finalist list. We also won a national competition, which is the York Wilson Award for the purchase of a really major work of art by Canadian artist Sherry Boyle, and also the Carry Forward exhibition that was really notorious in 2017. We've toured to Alberta and St. Catharines, Ontario, as well as Regina. What's upcoming is that we're really actively involved with our Canadian embassies in London, Canada House in England, Paris, Berlin, and New York in organizing a photo-based project by Canadian international artist Edward Hillel. Several other things that I bring to your attention is our real commitment to diversity and inclusivity. We continue to offer multilingual tours in 7 languages verbally, and now we're offering them in print, as well as we have an open conversation series that are hosted by newcomers in the region, and we do this in partnership with Waterloo Region Immigration Partnership. Our youth council that started 5 years ago has grown substantially. It started with 11 core groups sponsored by the TD Bank. It's now grown close to 100 youth between the ages of 15 and 20 that engage with us at the gallery. Seniors supporting seniors. We've had this program in place also for 5 years. We worked with Schlegel Institute of Aging as well as the Villages, Winston Park. And now we're training seniors to be art educators and deliver these programs in seniors' retirement residences, and it's really working out well. Civic engagement, we've been really taking our commitment and playing a role in civic engagement, and we, with the partnership with Perimeter Development Corporation, have brought in 4 leaders. Bruce Kawabera, we brought in Ken Greenberg, who's an urban designer, Heidi Reitmeyer, who's the Deputy Director at the Art Gallery of Ontario, and next week is Carolyn Robbie, who's from Quadrangle Architects, and she's actually going to talk about the Artscape Daniel Launchpad, and it's really pertinent to our region as we're looking at community and art hubs. Also, change agents. Women of Influence for Women's Art is a new benefactor group that was formed in November of last year. It started with 4 women. We now have 25 women, and we're going to change history and representation of women in collections and also in exhibitions. So they've already played a major role in a purchase of a major acquisition by Indigenous artist Meryl McMaster. We're also, you keep your eyes up for the Medicine Garden. It's an Indigenous medicine garden that's going to be out on Queen Street right outside, and it'll be on for 3 years. And Indigenous knowledge and medicinal plants will be featured. And for those of you that were here at the gallery on Friday, this is a new look for us. We spent a year and a half raising funds for this, so there's the before. It's not quite the after picture. I have a better one now, but the old lobby didn't really reflect the kind of contemporary vision that we wanted to project, and so we changed that. So thank you to the City of Waterloo and City of Kitchener for all your help.
Thank you very much, Shirley, and I know 3 of us were at the opening, and the new space looks awesome. Andrew, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Councillors. Always a pleasure to speak to you. I've said on many occasions we have an extraordinary symphony orchestra in this community, playing in an extraordinary gem acoustically at Centre in the Square. What's new, and what I would like to leave as the overall impression, is that we're now joined by a music director who is in the highest international echelon. André Ferrer may only be 28, but he is going to set the world on fire. Anybody who's seen him work at Centre in the Square with the symphony will know that. I've never before in my career across the world seen such talent in somebody so young, and certainly not Canadian talent. It is that exciting, and I hope you're going to want to buy into that. But he's also joined for the next 2 years by Barbara Kroll. She is from the Odawa First Nations, and she is the artist in residence and a cultural consultant for us, in helping us to address the Truth and Reconciliation agenda in a very creative and imaginative way. And we're paying to packed houses at the moment. There's an example of the end of last season, 2017-18. I would invite you to come to either the end of the Signature series, Carmina Burana, or the end of the Pop series, The Piano Men, but you can't because they're both going to sell out, so I'm sorry. Upcoming opportunities for us, we are right in the process at the moment of looking at extending our residencies both as a tenant in the Centre of the Square in our rental agreement, and also as a tenant at the Conrad Centre for the Performing Arts, which, as most of you know, we also steward. The Ontario Arts Council recently, in its multi-year funding, awarded the Symphony a B+. We're very proud of that. Not many organisations get that high. And this morning, the Canada Council announced, at least to us, if not publicly, that our funding will increase from the Canada Council by a total of just over 10% over 2 years, which is a shot in the arm. Truthfully, it's only really keeping pace with inflation over 6 years, but I'll take that at the moment. Any funding is encouraged. As we head in the 2021 season, we're going to be celebrating 75 years of Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony, a big milestone for our organisation of which we're very proud. Of course, we can do more. We could do more with more resources. It won't be a surprise to you. There's an example on the left-hand side of our project in North Waterloo, in the Cedar Brae, Sunnydale area. I would like to be doing that more effectively in Kitchener. If we had more resources, we would. We have the seeds of that developing in the neighbourhood around Highland and Queen. I hope we will do more. We're also now talking across Southwest Ontario to major artistic partners, and I think we should be coming up with some very exciting possibilities, but sadly they also depend on money. And I told you at the beginning that we have an extraordinary young man as our new music director. That's the truth. I hope that we, uniquely of the organisations presenting today, are physically able to get out in a much more easy way to represent this region nationally, internationally. We want to do that, and now is the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And last but certainly not least, David, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to see everybody and some new faces around the table. Congratulations to all. John, I'm sorry there's not time for questions because I know how we love to question each other. These three are awesome. It's really incredible what we have in this community, and I know if you could applaud, you would. And I'd also like to just congratulate Emily on her new role, Emily Robson at the City of Kitchener. She's great, and I'm looking forward to working with her. And now I've got to figure out how to work this. Our fiscal year ends June 30th, and we've had a very good fiscal. We've had one of the best, in fact, ever, notwithstanding the year of the Titanic, and we won't break even. We have had some wonderful exhibitions, some very interactive, immersive exhibitions. We're working with Spectrum. We're working with local and international artists who have created a magical experience that's being driven by Instagram, reducing our costs for marketing dollars and so on, and it's attracting all stages of life. It's really quite interesting to watch people of all ages in a ball pit or playing in a digital sandbox. We've also, one of our organizational goals is experiential learning. One of our values is experiential learning. And Spectrum is drawing people of all demographics, including the tech community and millennials. And they're coming in large, large numbers. We're very, very pleased with it. We've extended it already into January of next year. On our third level, BRAIN, the World Inside Your Head, is also doing very, very well. Our school numbers have increased. The numbers attending our STEAM and STEM programming has tripled, and we've confirmed our space as science, art, and technology at play. We've also become known as a place for tackling difficult and sometimes taboo topics. And when I said to Barry, we will be presenting Flow the Menstruation exhibition, Barry said, of course you will. And that was a compliment because it is something that we run toward, and it's a very important discussion that we're having. We're having a lot of people through the exhibition. We've issued a petition across the community urging all municipal buildings to offer free menstrual care products in their washrooms. We do it at the museum, and we're hoping that will catch on. Our measurement of success is relevance to this community. We're approaching 100,000 visitors this year for our fiscal, and for the first time we've received money from the Canadian Arts Council. That's a huge step for us. If we're successful with the grant that's in there now, we're then eligible for some operating funding, which would be hugely needed and wonderful. Upcoming events, we're very, very pleased to be hosting Margaret Atwood at Centre in the Square on March 30th. Unlike the symphony, we do have some tickets left over, so if you're interested, please check our website or let me know. Going into the fall, we will continue with Spectrum for that broad demographic appeal, but building on the success of immersive experience, we will be welcoming all to Seance. We are working with a number of partners, and we have found these tapes that were captured in the 1960s in a house on Frederick, owned by Otto Smith. The family still lives there. The medium was Thomas Lacey, and these tapes are quite incredible. There's even a tape of the mayor of the day in the 60s who had passed away, where the medium channels him. So we're very, very pleased to be working with a number of artists and different things. It's immersive, it's out there, and it's what we do. We're very, very excited about that. And we'll be targeting the university students and the millennial group to take the ION and come to the museum. In January, we are looking to build, as best we can, a region-wide festival on climate change. I know the city, at the mayor's State of the City address, you highlighted that. We've been working with a number of community groups. We will be working with Conestoga College, Wilfrid Laurier, and the University of Waterloo. We've got 20 partners so far. There will be an anchor exhibit on the 4th floor, and we hope to build out the 3rd floor. The Toronto Star will be the media partner, and we would love to add the City of Kitchener to the list. It's obviously very, very topical and something we need to rally around as a community. So we appreciate the support you offer. It simply isn't enough. The funding model that I inherited is broken, and we should never have opened under it. The grants that you are able to give are not equal nor by merit, and I'm not sure how you square that when you do your budget. But we are hoping to work with you to find that vision that we will all look back on to say we've done the right thing and we're proud of it. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. And that seance exhibit, is that sort of like the bringing back the mayors of cities past or something like that?
There are approximately 150 tapes that were donated to the University of Waterloo, and the tapes, to digitize them, are fairly expensive at $150 each. But at this home on Frederick, the home of Otto Smith, Thomas Lacey was a medium. There was a picture of him up there, actually, and he would hold regular seances there. And we're going to recreate that, and I think it'll be fun. So, yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. We do have some questions, so maybe the four of you can kind of be down front. Well, there's only one question so far, and that's Councillor Michaud.
Actually, it's not a question. It's just I'd like to commend all four organizations. Having a healthy arts and culture in our community just adds to a vibrant community, and I applaud all the hard work and the innovative ideas that you have brought forth this evening. Congratulations.
Thank you. Any other questions? So I too will just add my thanks to the four of you and your respective staffs and boards for all of the work that I know you do throughout the year to help develop in a significant way as institutions the arts and culture scene in our community, which is so important both in terms of quality of life for our residents, but also in terms of being able to attract and retain talent from an economic development point of view. So thank you for all of you that you do, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in the months and years ahead. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we'll now move on to delegations, and we have several. I want to remind delegations that you have 5 minutes to make your presentation, and we will begin with the Executive Director of our Downtown Kitchener Business Improvement Area, Linda Yutzi, regarding the 2019 budget, which is listed as item B2 on the Committee of the Whole agenda. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be in front of you, Mayor Verbanovic and Kitchener councillors. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. I just want to make one correction. Mostly it's about the 2018 audited financial statements. You mentioned 2019, so mostly what I'm speaking about is the report that you received about our 2018 financials. So there's going to be 4 parts to the presentation. In the first part, I'm going to just talk about the 2018 budget and give you a few highlights and just talk about a few of the projects that we were able to deliver. And then the second part, I'd like to speak to and just provide a little bit more clarity around the audited financials that you received. I just felt that it was a very high level and a little bit vague, and I thought that you might like a little bit more information about that. I will then speak about a very exciting project in 2019 that was started in 2018, and I'll give you a chance to ask me some questions. So the first part, the 2018 BIA budget, I just want to go over a few highlights. This budget included a line item that you would have seen under revenue for $100,000. That was not a grant. That was actually a commitment by the BIA Board of Directors to inject $100,000 as we had promised that we would not raise the levy. In 2018, we introduced a new beautification effort, the Waste Management Project, and it was a very exciting project. It was the first year, and in the end of the presentation, I'll talk about the exciting second part of the project. That project allowed us to move waste away from King Street, given all the beautification efforts that we made. In 2018, it marked the first year of, we committed $300,000 to the Queen Street project, so that represented the first year of giving $100,000 for each year. We had a shift in our live music and our patio scene because people said they wanted more after 5. 2018 marked the third year of the Discovery Team, a very successful project. If I have time, I'll read a quote from Waterloo Regional Police Services at the end. That's a $60,000 commitment. We also had the continuation of giving the city $50,000 for the planting of flowers downtown. And we had year 3 of our downtown patio program, where the downtown BIA financed fencing, furniture, umbrellas. The intent was to make downtown look beautiful and make those patios very inviting for people to stay after 5 o'clock. Our total investment in the patios over 3 years is approximately $140,000. And 2018 also marked another successful year of the Community Builder Grant. This is a grant that's on the BIA website and does allow for participants and applicants to get up to $10,000 if they're small, if they have a small event, or even artists that want to have murals. The funds are there for them to apply for. So those are just a few highlights. As you can see, there was a really large emphasis in 2018 on beautification and cleaning up downtown and creating a really great experience. So under the 2018 financial audits, the copy that I have that you received, I believe, it was vague, and it had, under marketing, it had one line. And I just wanted to point out to councillors that really represents about 19 different categories, that marketing line. The report that you received does represent correct numbers. It shows a surplus of $83,000, but the real surplus was about $33,000, because what the report didn't tell you is that we had 3 deferred projects. So one of the deferred projects was the mural on Evie Street. Just for reasons out of our control, it had to be delayed a year. It's going in this June. The second delay was directional signage around the city, wayfinding into downtown. That had to be delayed, just logistics due to the city and the region and the poles and where the signs are. Excuse me. The new waste management program came in under budget. We were really fortunate to be able to work with the Job Cafe Working Center, and the City of Kitchener Facilities Management helped us cleaning the Molochs and cleaning the areas where we diverted waste. So the real surplus was about $33,000. Last week, the BIA Board of Directors decided that and voted that $27,000 of those funds would go towards a second downtown discovery team that's going to be operated after 5 o'clock. There's a real need for that downtown. And then the remainder of an accumulated surplus will be discussed at the May board meeting, approximately $100,000. The new project in 2019 that I wanted to tell you about, that I'm really excited about, it's just amazing for downtown. It's phase 2 of the waste management program. So like I said, in 2018, we just diverted waste away from our beautiful patios. We wanted people to come downtown, enjoy live music, and stay, but we had waste. We had garbage bags all over King Street and on side streets. So in year 1, we just diverted that waste. We simply took it to another location where it was removed. The second part of the waste diversion program in 2019 will actually be to run a pilot with up to 20 businesses, mostly restaurants, We are going to create jobs through the Job Cafe, through the Working Center again. Those people are going to pick up the organic waste. It will be hauled out by a local hauling company, more local jobs. The waste will go to Elmira to Bio-N-Power, where there's a anaerobic digester, and that waste will be converted to electricity and go back to our local grid. We will be the first downtown in Ontario to do a circular economy waste diversion program, and I'm really proud of that. And I think it speaks volumes to how downtown Kitchener cares about the community. So that's just a little bit about what happened in 2018. Wanted to share the new project, which is Phase 2 of waste diversion, and now give you an opportunity to ask me any questions about the programs and the budget. Thank you.
Okay, and I will point council to 2-1 in your agenda under the Committee of the Whole, which is the approval of the budget for both the downtown BIA and the Belmont BIA, which we'll be dealing with after questions of Ms. Yutzi. And we have several. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, a lot of my questions have been answered by your presentation, so thank you for that. I was wondering about the $100,000 grant, which isn't a grant. You say you were going to invest that. Where would you invest that from? Where would the money come from?
I'm sorry, I'm confused about which 100,000. Are you talking about the injection that we made into the 2018 budget?
Yeah, I was looking at the second line in the 2018 budget, and it said other revenue grant.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what that was is we've had a running surplus, and we did have funds in the bank, and we decided to execute all of our programs in 2018 would come close to $1,379,000, but we were only collecting $1,279,000 through the levy because we agreed to inject our surplus funds to not raise the levy.
Okay, so I understand. Yeah, I understand. So you're going to use some of your surplus, which is good. Okay, that's great. The other question I had, and it's really up to your members, but your marketing budget for 2019 is increasing 40% over 2018. Now, I gather all your members are aware of this and satisfied with that, or?
That is correct, Councillor Gazzola. So we take our budget to the Town Hall in October. We ask for approval, and I give the members 30 days to reach out to me personally if they have any issues with the budget. Again, everything's been grouped into one line. So marketing represents events, patios, live music, waste management. It really should be broken down a little bit better in the future so that you can see where these funds are going. Everything's been classed under marketing. So, yes, it was approved.
Okay, fine. And finally, I want to compliment you on waste diversion. I don't know how many nights I've come to council on council nights and asked about garbage bags lying out along our main street that really did take away from our downtown, and you are doing something about that, so my compliments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola.
Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, just if we need a mover for the motion at the appropriate time, I will be happy to move it.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Yutzi, for being here this evening. I did have a question around the surplus, and I was wondering why there's such a large surplus this year. If you could expand upon that.
That's what thank you, Councillor Johnson. To answer your question, what I was explaining, and I was talking really fast with the 5 minutes. As I said when I started, the numbers reflect an $83,000 surplus. Indeed, that is not the case. It's more of a $33,000 surplus. We had to defer 2 projects that were scheduled and budgeted in 2018. For reasons out of our control, we had to defer the mural that's going on EB Street. We made a commitment to spend money on the Market District, but we were not able to apply the mural in good weather in 2018. So the project was deferred, creating a surplus. The second surplus was the signage project, and we couldn't get the wayfinding signs just because of logistics completed. So those two projects equal a surplus of over $55,000, which leaves us with roughly a $33,000 true surplus.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I had a question then as well around marketing, and I think that you have kind of touched on that, but it's a very large budget. So I agree that I would like to see it broken down a little bit more. I really like the waste diversion project. I think that's amazing. To have that under marketing, though, seems odd to me.
It is.
And I would, so perhaps if that can be split up in a different way. Maybe if you could expand, though, upon maybe some of the other projects that you're doing around marketing. I mean, it's a really big budget, so maybe there's some noticeable things that you can mention that people would be able to recognize.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Johnston. So basically the marketing, again, the way in which it's been presented to you, that actually includes events. So the real marketing number that is marketing in terms of our magazine, the business startup grant that we created, that was fully used in 2018 for $30,000. We had a spring marketing campaign. We had a downtown magazine. There's promotions and sponsorships. So the actual real marketing budget is probably closer to a $200,000 line item. And then there's other projects in that big number that you see.
Okay, that's a big difference between almost 714,000 and 200,000. So having that split out in the future would be really great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there don't appear to be any other questions. I just have one quick one, Ms. Yotzi. This is a follow-up to Councillor Johnson's earlier question around the 2018 surplus, and then when we look at the 2018 budget and the 2019 budget, the other revenue grant the budget for it in 2018 was $100,000. We only ended up using $1,001, and then in 2019 we're only using $10,000 of it. So the net result is the accumulated surplus as of the end of 2018 is $289,161. And it shows that same accumulated surplus at the end of 2019. But you said there are a number of deferred projects. So where are they getting funded from?
Thank you, Mayor Vanbeck. I missed the last sentence. You said the number of projects.
So the accumulated surplus, according to the proposed budget in Appendix 8, shows as being $289,161 as the actual at the end of 2018, and the same accumulated surplus at the end of 2019. But there are things that you're carrying over from 2018, so I'm just wondering where they're getting funded from.
So there's no lack of funding for any of the projects. All the projects will be fully funded. We will have, we have always kept on reserve approximately 10% of our total budget for emergencies. Those funds are sitting in a GIC. The Finance Committee discussed that it's in our best interest to keep just under 10% on reserve. Therefore, by spending another approximate $30,000 on a second discovery team, keeping a small reserve for emergency will free up approximately $100,000 for an additional project. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. I'll follow up with you afterwards.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Marsh.
I'm just moving the recommendation that the 2019 budgets for both the BIA, the Downtown Kitchener BIA and the Belmont BIA be approved.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Ioannidis? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. It's been approved.
Thank you.
Thanks. And we will now move on to 6B. Mr. Alfonso Roach? Is Alfonso Roach here? No? Okay, we'll come back to that one in case he comes later. 6C, Kate Lawson, who's here with respect to item 8 under Community and Infrastructure Services. Welcome, Ms. Lawson.
Thank you.
You're looking for a presentation?
I am.
Yeah. Okay. The clerk is working on it for you.
Thank you. Hello, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Kate Lawson. I live on Glasgow Street in Kitchener. I'm here to speak about protecting urban forests, particularly on private land. The lovely photographs in this slide are from my neighbours Lillian and Andrew Bass on Maple Hill Drive, who also deeply value the urban forest in Kitchener. I also want to acknowledge the important work of Judy Ann Chapman of the Greenbelt Neighbourhood Association on the Urban Forestry Initiative. I'm here to advocate for a simple imperative: to conserve and protect the urban forest prudently on public and private lands. That is a quotation from the excellent It's a Tree's Life, Kitchener Sustainable Urban Forest Strategy, 2019 to 2039. Let me emphasize those dates, 2019 to 2039. We're talking about today, but also the future of our trees. I won't repeat the excellent arguments given in the It's a Tree's Life report to conserve trees. The 10 ways that trees can help us, the significant benefits of older trees of at least 40 years of age, and so on. I do want to focus on an element that I think is underplayed in that report: the role of private land and the bylaws that can protect trees and forests on private property. It's my contention that every removal of a mature, healthy tree, or worse, the removal of a mature, healthy forest, is a loss that our community cannot sustain. The mature maples in this photograph are actually in my backyard, but I view them as a public good that I'm helping to protect. Page 22 of the report suggests that our first action as a city should be to increase community awareness through education. I respectfully submit that this is a time for action, not simply for education. And that's because of the significant actions that already have and that continue to degrade our trees. I know personally of many fine, healthy trees that have been cut down by owners who simply don't want them. They don't want shade, they don't want a rake, they want to build a shed. My neighbors Andrew and Lillian report that 4 out of 20 wooded properties on their street alone have been largely or virtually clear-cut. As you know, I could buy a property in Kitchener tomorrow. I could cut down a 50-year-old maple tree. I could sell that property in 6 months' time. I have no responsibility to be a good steward of the natural environment, to think about the future, to think indeed about 2039. Now, the report suggests that a potential update of existing bylaws about protecting trees on private property may be required. Well, I'm suggesting that an effective update of existing bylaws is actually urgent and essential. How to do it? Well, I'm just a private citizen. I'm not an expert in urban forestry, but I suggest we look at comparator cities. For example, the cover of this illustration is the cover of the City of Toronto Tree Protection Policy Statement. It represents the tree protection barriers built in construction zones to protect trees. This would be something very easy for the City of Kitchener to undertake. Let's protect trees near construction zones. Let me also suggest that we could look at our neighboring city of Guelph with its commitment to, as it says, having the highest tree canopy among comparable municipalities. Well, let's match Guelph. Let's do even better than Guelph. Kitchener, we know, led the way in blue box recycling. Let's now take the lead in urban forestry. Finally, let's take a look at the stringent protections that are already in place in the city of Vancouver. Vancouver insists that one must have an urgent reason to cut a tree on private property. For example, if it is dead or dying or hazardous or directly interfering with utility wires and so on. Otherwise, that policy states, all property development, renovation, or new building requires you to retain existing trees located on your property. In effect, if you don't want trees, don't buy a property with trees on them, with trees on it. In closing, let me say that a mature tree is almost literally irreplaceable in our lifetime. I'm speaking here, I think, to many gray-haired people like myself in the audience. If there were a 10-year-old, yes, they could plant a tree today and in 40 years' time have a mature tree providing all the important functions of cleaning the air, capturing carbon, preventing floods, providing habitat, and so on. But 2039 is not very far away in a tree's life. So I'm asking you to act now to preserve and protect trees for future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in. There are some questions for you. Councillor Johnson?
Yes, thank you through the chair. Thank you so much, Ms. Lawson, for coming in, and thank you to the Greenbelt Neighborhood Association. Thank you for all the work that you've been doing. Thank you to Lillian and Andrew. You've had some very creative ideas with regards to looking at saving trees on private property. I'm very appreciative of that. And I guess I can speak for the council in that on April 15th we did pass a motion with regards to looking at trees on private property when people are good stewards and are encouraging growth and plantings of trees. What can the city do in terms of a stormwater utility management credit? So that's a step in the right direction. Perhaps you can comment on trees on properties that are under an acre that we've talked about, if you want to maybe give some ideas on that.
Well, really, all of my comments are directed towards on properties under an acre. As you know, there are protections in Kitchener for properties over an acre, but really it's a free-for-all if your property's under an acre. And I guess I'm suggesting that, like Vancouver, we should think of every single tree on a small lot or a large lot as actually part of the important protection of the environment and the enhancement of the urban environment for all of us. Trees take a long time to grow, and if we cut down a tree today that's 50 years old, we're not going to get that back. Well, not in my lifetime, to say maybe there are some younger people in the audience. So we should really be thinking in the very long term for trees.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask a question of Ms. McGoldrick?
Sure, I think those are all the questions we have for you.
Thank you
very
so
much.
I appreciate it.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McGoldrick, you and I have had a chat about this as well. Maybe you can comment on the protections that are already in place in terms of protecting trees when neighbors are doing work on their lots, etc. What do we have currently in place?
Ms. McGoldrick?
So, through the Mayor, in terms of the existing tree protection bylaw for private trees, the delegate is correct. That bylaw is in effect for property over 1 acre. And so for properties over 1 acre, a tree removal permit is required, which outlines specifically tree preservation plans and tree replanting plans associated with that. I do want to point out that the City of Kitchener does have tree protection policies that would be very similar to the example shown from the City of Toronto in terms of the hoarding and protection around trees. And so that is certainly something that we provide to it's available on our website, and we certainly enforce through the tree protection bylaw. And then we also have another protective bylaw related to trees on public lands, and so that trees on public lands can't be injured or harmed as well. That being said, I do appreciate, and I know this council has identified to staff the importance of tree protection measures, and that's why in the staff report, in the table of priorities for implementation of the long-term strategy, but in the short term, over the next 5 years, to look at conserving and protecting the urban forest as one of the priority actions identified. And so that's certainly an area that we would look to as part of the implementation.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure if you can answer this question, Ms. McGoldrick, but I'm going to ask anyways. With respect to plantation trees, there's been a number of areas within the ward I represent that I keep hearing the properties being clear-cut, but it's being said, but it's a plantation. Does that make any difference of the importance of the tree, if it's a plantation tree or if it's a different type of tree?
Oh, sorry, Ms. McGoldrick. Go ahead.
Through the chair, my understanding in terms of what is evaluated when a tree removal permit is being requested, it looks at species and native versus non-native, health of the tree. And so I don't believe, and I had a look at my planning colleagues who do administer the tree permit process, but I don't believe whether it's a plantation or other tree specimens, that it makes a difference. I think it comes down to the information provided in the tree removal plan.
Okay, I agree. We need to make sure that every tree is important and that we're not clear-cutting areas where we should be saving the trees.
Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, just a question of staff. Just what would be next steps if council were to ask about reducing the minimum size of a yard that would, or a property that would require a permit to remove the tree? So rather than 1 acre, to make it something similar to what was proposed by the delegate.
Ms. McGoldrick?
So through the chair, so our plan through this this implementation item would be to review the protective bylaws, look at other comparator municipalities, and look to see whether the 1 acre is an appropriate threshold or should be reduced in terms of the threshold. And so we would do that body of work. We would also look to engage the community, and so to understand, we know that through the engagement with the Sustainable Urban Forest Strategy, we heard varying different viewpoints in terms of the city's role on protecting private trees, and so we know that it can be a divisive item, and we would look to get feedback from the community in terms of what would be the appropriate level of control and oversight that the city should have in this area.
So it's within your plans within the next 5 years to review that body of work, but do you have any indication whether it's in the next year or two or not?
So through the chair, we did look to see what our existing commitment was through the 2019 budget, and we know we have an aggressive replanting strategy, and staff's efforts are really focused on that strategy, recognizing that reforesting our urban forest is also a really high priority. So we did look at potential timelines of when we could start to shift staff resources to look at other bodies of work, such as tree conservation, tree preservation. Likely that would be in 2021 unless we were to reprioritize.
Okay, so that's something we can discuss at a later date. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Galloway-Seelock, can you bring that item forward, please?
Yes, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dave Schneider that the Sustainable Urban Forest Strategy attached as Appendix A to the Infrastructure Services Department report be approved as the city's guiding document for planning, engaging, maintaining, protecting, and planting Kitchener's urban forest. And then I'm not going to read all of it, but I want to include that staff be directed to provide a grant of up to $40,000 a year as approved in the 2019 budget to REAP Green Solutions to deliver a subsidized tree planting program in 2019, 2020, and 2021, and further that staff be directed to investigate providing stormwater credits for trees located on private property through the development of a stormwater utility market initiative program and report back to council with possible options within the first quarter of 2020. And if I can just make a quick comment. I think this is something that we need to maybe act on sooner than later. I think the plan is great. I think there's a lot of good things in it. I'm happy that we even have an urban forest strategy. And so it's definitely moving in the right direction. But I think when it comes budget time, we may want to look at having more resources be deployed in this area so we can get some of this strategy done sooner than later. And so I think that's something that we need to keep in the back of our minds as we move forward to next year's budget.
Okay, thank you for those comments. And I'll just add at council today my thanks to staff again for the work that has been done on the strategy, and thanks to the delegation that's come in. I agree this is something we need to look at, but I think as we do look at it and as it comes forward, it's also important that we put a careful lens on it in terms of how we approach it. And the discussion with the community, because I think we also want to make sure that we're not sending out a message that creates or that gets those maybe who are inclined to start cutting trees down unnecessarily to start doing it prematurely for fear of a bylaw coming in place. So I think there needs to be a good deal of community dialogue around it and sensitivity so that we don't see that happen, because we know that sometimes that can be the inadvertent, at least temporary result when policy change occurs. And so that's something that staff can think about, no doubt, as this conversation continues in the months ahead. So it has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much for coming in. We'll now move on to item 6D, which is the Crosby. We have 7 registered delegations on, but representing 8 sets of owners, so we'll have 8 presentations in total. I do understand that there will be a number of staff recommended changes to the proposal, I believe, or to the recommendations that are in front of us. And does somebody want to go over those maybe before we hear from the delegations, just so that delegations are aware of what staff are proposing so that they can comment accordingly? I think that might be the most effective use of time. And then I know there's some that will no doubt come from council as well. Who wants to, well, once you're ready, who wants to tackle it? Mr. Sloan? We'll give you time to get set up.
Thank you, Mayor. So staff are here to help with the finalization of the new zoning bylaw stage 1 tonight. There have been several discussions that have continued since Standing Committee. Standing Committee made a recommendation and there were some amendments. One of the delegations tonight is here on 2 properties. One of them is 108 Aaron Street. And so through discussions, what staff are recommending is that we defer the new zoning bylaw to that property until a future stage of the new zoning bylaw. There's an advantage for that. As a future stage of the new zoning bylaw, we're actually going to be creating some additional zones to add to our employment areas, especially in the central neighborhoods, called innovation employment, which might be a candidate to look at the area that this property is in. So we would like some additional time to further review. So the recommendation is before you on that one. The next one that we have is 72 St. Ledger Street. They have an existing site-specific provision in the zoning right now, and there's a number of uses in this building. And the landowner and the representative has brought that to our attention, and we have worked through with them, and so we are recommending that the bylaw that's before you tonight be further amended to add a site-specific provision number 158 to that property. And we have the wording here and have provided it to the to Legislative Services, to the clerk tonight. So Sarah can show us the next page. This is an employment property. What we're recommending is that some additional uses be added, that be permitted. Many of these exist on the property. However, because it is close to a residential area, we're requesting at the same time that a few uses not be permitted that may not be as compatible with residential in the nearby vicinity. And I believe there's a delegation here that would be speaking to this particular one. So that's what we have right now for those two properties, and I think as we hear the delegations, there may be additional items that might come up either from us in response, because we've received some new information and new letters right before this meeting, or that may come from members of council.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. So I will again just remind delegations that you have 5 minutes to make your presentation, and the first delegation is Brandon Fluelling from GSP Group. Welcome, Brandon.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Planning staff just sort of stole my thunder. I'm here to speak about 108 Aaron Street and 72 St. Ledger Street. I did have the opportunity since the last planning committee meeting to meet with staff, to review the properties specifically, and ultimately come to the recommendations that they've provided for you today. So I'm just here in support of those recommendations, and hopeful that we can council would see fit to move forward as staff has recommended.
Okay, thank you very much. There don't appear to be any questions, so we will deal with that at the end of when we deal with the bylaw. Next delegation is Mr. Hal Yeager. Welcome, Mr. Yeager.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for your time and attention. I would like to express my appreciation for the fine work of the Planning Department in developing the first stage of our proposed new zoning bylaw. I recognize the extraordinary efforts being made to develop our new land use legislation and to listen to a wide array of concerns. And I thank Council for empowering the Planning Department to do its work. Yes, there remains some aspects of the proposed zoning bylaw that may require more attention, but by and large, I hope virtually everyone who gives it a fair rating can agree it is a substantial improvement over our current zoning bylaw. Moreover, some of the challenging aspects are already scheduled to be addressed. 2 Mondays ago, I tried to present my concern that the proposed base zoning provisions in Crosby do not guarantee appropriate transitions in height and massing between abutting and proximate zones. I am concerned for myself and my neighbors throughout the city that without an amendment, we would be making it legal, for example, to set a structure of unlimited height 7.5 meters away from a property zoned low-rise residential with a maximum height of 11 meters. This evening, I request that Council adopts the following amendment with the proposed zoning bylaw to assure the community that appropriate transitions will be implemented. I understand that planning staff intend to ensure the appropriate transitions are implemented through the secondary plan or neighborhood review process. Having discussed my concerns with planning staff, I believe the proposed amendment is acceptable to staff and will not impede their work. In fact, by Council declaring its intention to ensure appropriate transitions, the amendment may instill further confidence in the community in working with staff in coming months. I will now read the requested amendment. That to further address and ensure an appropriate transition of maximum building height between adjacent and proximate zones, planning staff prepares site-specific provisions or modifications to the zoning bylaw through a consultative process. This may occur through the review of specific neighborhoods, for example, current process of reviewing secondary plan areas and/or future stages of the new zoning bylaw. If Council will please accept this request, it will give us confidence that our future zoning is to be founded on fairness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yeager. We do have some questions for you. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager, for coming in and sharing your passion for city planning and for thanking our staff who've worked on this for several years. And so really what I want to know is it's my understanding that staff have met with you and collaborated on the wording of this motion. And so, and I'll ask staff later for confirmation of that. But what I want to know is, do you realize that most of the properties that we're looking at approving in this phase 1 of the Crosby are not directly adjacent to low-rise residential? So most of the properties, this amendment is really just about future. Are you aware of that?
I am aware that most of the mapping of properties at this time are taking place in the urban growth center and in non-residential areas throughout the city.
Yeah.
But the base zoning provisions, the definitions of mixed 2, mixed 3, I've seen secondary plans including mixed 4. I don't know how that fits even in Crosby because it's not exactly defined. But they're proposed in the secondary plans and the definitions are being created now. Mm-hmm. And the definitions themselves do not define the transition from low-rise residential to those higher stages. Yeah. And that's the concern.
Right, I understand that. And so for future phases of Crosby, once these mixed-use zones are created and defined, then staff and council and the community will have a chance to look at site-specific considerations for adding on to the definition of mixed use. And that's my understanding. Is that your understanding of it as well?
That is indeed what I've heard from staff, and I'm just asking for council to tell us that is the plan and to commit to that plan so that we will have confidence going forward. Yeah. We hear that and I think we appreciate that.
Okay, thank you so much. And so at the appropriate time, I'm very happy to bring this suggested amendment forward just to provide some, comfort and ease of mind to the delegate. I personally have always seen this as an assumption from what I've heard from staff as something that is happening anyway, but to provide some comfort, that I'm happy to bring it forward at the appropriate time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, well, I'll come back to you after you bring forward the overall motion as revised. Okay, sorry, just one more question, or one more set of questions for you. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you very much for, first of all, bringing this to our attention. I agree. I think staff has done a great job in pulling together the stage 1 of the Crosby, and I think it's details like this that sometimes certainly I overlook, and so I appreciate your motion. And assuming that, as has been suggested, that it doesn't impede the work that's being done already, but it just does give clarification, I would second the motion. So, thank you.
Thank you.
One more, hold on. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, no, I don't have any questions. I I do know that you've been following this very closely and working very hard on it and really offering considerable assistance to staff, and that you've met with staff and had some good discussions, and from what I understand, everyone's in agreement now. So I just want to thank you for the time that you've taken, and the other people in the community who have been so engaged. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yeager, for coming in for your input. Heather Price, and I believe you're here for 2 different sets of properties. So we'll start with the first one, which I believe is the Salvation Army property.
Good evening, Mayor Verbanovic and members of council. My name is Heather Price. I'm with GSP Group, and I'm joined this evening by Major Corinne Cameron, pastor of the church at 75 Tilsley Drive, as well as Phil Hewitson, who is a member of the congregation there. So I'm going to start with my delegation with respect to 75 Tilsley Drive and 525 Aaronbrook. These are 2 properties that are jointly owned by the Governing Council of the Salvation Army of Canada. They are located on the corner of Westmount Road and Tilsley Drive, and they have frontage on Aaronbrook Drive as well. And they are 2 distinct properties. They have always been that way since the time the subdivision was registered. They are 2 separate blocks in that subdivision. The church that exists today is on 75 Tilsley Drive at the corner, and the block to the south, 525 Aaronbrook, is vacant, and it has been intended for development all these years. It is used seasonally as a community garden and skating rink, and the intent is to maintain that community use on the church lands. However, the church has development plans for the balance of the site on 525 Aaronbrook for low-rise residential purposes. When the official plan was updated in 2014, both properties were redesignated institutional. At this time, the city is proposing to apply institutional zoning, which is fitting for the institutional designation. However, the concern is with respect to 525 Aaronbrook Drive, the plan is for residential development in accordance with the zoning that applies today, and the former official plan designation, which was low-rise residential. The owner's concern is maintaining the development permissions that are well underway and the planning applications that are in process. At the Committee of Adjustment meeting on Tuesday, April 16th, the Committee of Adjustment approved a lot addition application that is to enlarge the church site. So a portion of 525 Aaronbrook is to be conveyed to the church lands, enlarging the church site, and that would facilitate continuation of the community garden and skating rink uses. So the balance of the site is to be defined for low-rise residential development. The owner has also filed a site plan application that will be heard by the Site Plan Review Committee at its meeting May 8th, 2019. And that site plan is for a 3-story apartment building that completely complies with the zoning of today. So where we are with the Crosby process means that the institutional zoning that's proposed to be applied at 525 Aaronbrook will create a legal nonconforming condition for that apartment building that's not yet even out of the ground. So at this time, we are requesting that Council consider including 525 Aaronbrook in the official plan amendment that is before Council. There are a number of other amendments in that official plan amendment that look to redesignate lands as necessary to reflect their planned development intent. There are some that are proposed to be redesignated institutional to low-rise residential, and that's what we're seeking here tonight for 525 Aaronbrook. We would also ask that the zoning to be applied to that land be deferred to a future part of the Crosby process, a future stage where the residential zones are to be developed and applied in order to better reflect its planned development intent for a low-rise apartment building. To be clear, the church is very much in support of institutional designation and institutional zoning as proposed in the Crosby bylaw for 75 Tilsley, where the church sits today. That would be perfectly appropriate and very much supported by the church, as they too want to preserve that land use over the long term. Our request this evening is specifically with respect to 525 Ehrenbrook. So that concludes the formal portion of my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. We do have some questions. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Heather, for presenting and giving a fair background of the site. And I'm comforted by your last comment saying that the Salvation Army is quite supportive of the institutional zone. And that's the reason why they expanded on that site by taking the severance from 525 Ehrenbrook to enlarging their site for additional usage. And part of that usage, would that be to continue on the ice rink and the community garden that exists there currently?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, indeed, that is the intent, to continue those community uses on the church site.
That's excellent. That's really good to hear for the community's sake. As a side note, the Salvation Army were gracious enough to partner with the city some 8 years ago to allow the community garden and the ice rink, and that's facilitated that community really well. Because you guys have already gone through the site plan process, so let's presume, for example, no decision is taken as to your request, and it carries as being put forward by staff. Because you've already gone through the site plan process for what your purpose is on 525 Ehrenbrook, does that still shelter you in a way? You could still proceed with that residential development going forward, irrespective of what's being recognized through the Crosby?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's our understanding that the transition provisions of the Crosby bylaw would allow any site plan that's already in process under the current bylaw, zoning bylaw 85-1, to continue on. And although those transition provisions have a sunset clause after 3 years, and it's at that point that any development, no matter the state it's in, would become legal non-conforming under the new zoning bylaw provisions. So that's part of the reason for the concern, is that sunset clause that would not grant the legal status in perpetuity.
And that does apply for this circumstance, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you simply just don't want to be put into that legal non-conforming aspect of the zoning?
That's correct.
Okay. So what would serve, going forward, what would serve best? A deferral that would allow you to carry on your conversation with staff, because at the end of the day, we would want to make sure that both parties come to a appropriate understanding, or are you at this point requesting that 525 be recognized not institutional but as residential?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our request this evening is for the 525 to be included in the official plan amendment that's before Council, to be redesignated from institutional to low-rise residential.
Right. To low-rise residential, okay. I would have questions of staff proceeding. I think this is probably advisable course, but I would have some additional questions of staff for clarification. Thank you.
Okay, those are the questions we have for you on this item. Councillor Singh, do you want to ask your questions of staff on this one before we go on to Ms. Price's next delegation? Oh, you turned off. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, staff have heard from the delegation as to their request and obviously their circumstance, which seems to be quite explicit to their to them, as opposed to what concerns what we would have of starting to designate institutional properties to residential purpose. How do staff see their request?
Oops. Mr. Sloan?
Through the mayor, this particular site has a site plan application in, so it is subject to the transition provisions, so that was correct through the delegation. So they can proceed with their site plan for residential under the existing zoning. They're correct that they do have a number of years. If there's the concern about legal nonconforming, at this point in time, the staff recommendation is we are trying to conserve as many of the institutional lands as possible. But we do understand that if council is inclined to defer the zoning of this site, and then any resultant potential official plan amendment that might be needed to a future stage of the zoning bylaw, i.e. when we deal with the residential zones in each ward, that staff can work with that. It does give them the time to see if this application does come to fruition and proceed. And so we would have some time for that. If council's inclined to go by way of tonight doing an official plan amendment for the site and possibly changing the zoning or deferring the zoning, not as ideal from staff standpoint. It is a little bit last minute, so I think we prefer the deferral side.
So with the deferral, would they still require to have to go through official plan? Because again, if you leave them the way they are right now, they have a site plan and process that does safeguard them for their intent to proceed with or possible sale that someone else may develop that site for residential purposes. But again, that would, one, put them into a sunset clause of 3 years, and two, that site would be legal non-conforming. Neither which, we necessarily don't like putting properties into legal non-conforming. If you go with, as suggested by staff, in the deferral, does that still require them to have to go through official plan amendment at a later point?
Through the mayor, if it was deferred by council to revisit in a future stage, then the city, we would conduct that as part of that process.
So they would have to go through official plan amendment?
We would do that as the city. If we were recommending that the property be residential at the time, we would have a companion official plan amendment as well. It's still subject to a council decision in the future, so we're not committing whether staff would be recommending that at the time. But our position right now would be that we would like to see if a residential development comes to fruition in that time frame over 3 years.
And is this something similar to what's being suggested for Aaron's and St. Ledger?
Through the chair, it's a little bit different. Through the mayor, it's a little bit different. For those properties, they were, number one, the Aaron's and St. Ledger ones were just added through a public process this year. So they are new. They haven't been considered over the last 3 or 4 years. And this particular property has a site plan application in. And so that differentiates it a little bit. It's also a different topic when we're dealing with the preservation of institutional lands.
Okay, as just a last minute summary, so staff are suggesting that council consider potentially deferring for future Crosby review. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, that would be our preference if council is inclined to go that way.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I would be bringing forward that amendment for this site.
So I'll come back to you to bring forward that amendment at the appropriate time. Okay, so with that, Ms. Price will now move on to the other delegation that you're here for.
Okay, that would be my pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for accommodating the two back-to-back. As you may recall, I was here for the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee discussion, both in the afternoon session as well as the evening session, and in fact all of the other PSI meetings along the way with this lengthy Crosby process. And I have had numerous discussions with staff along the way. And I think we're at a very good place where we are this evening with a bylaw that you're hearing about some fine-tuning, essentially, at this point. So that's a nod to staff for the hard work and the progress that's been made along the way. I do want to take this opportunity to speak to one of the things I heard about at that session, and that was the discussion around bonusing. You heard a number of delegations at the April 15th PSI meetings with respect to the bonusing framework. And it even turned into somewhat of a discussion on the principles of bonusing, of where the cap is without bonusing, how far you can go with bonusing, which items should be bonusable or considered to be community benefits. There was an interesting discussion at that meeting, and ultimately I think the committee quite rightly decided to defer the subject of bonusing to allow for more discussion on that point. And that will be heard at the May 13th PSI meeting. My submission is around how the bonusing is very much connected to the urban growth center zones. The bonusing discussion that will continue needs to consider how it impacts the urban growth center zones And it's my submission that the urban growth center zones should be deferred with the bonusing provisions because they go very much hand in hand. On a related note, Council has before it this evening an official plan amendment that I just referred to in the previous submission. That official plan amendment also contains quite a number of amendments to the enabling bonusing provisions of the official plan. It is the document that, the official plan is the governing document that identifies what is a community benefit and what can be bonused through the zoning bylaw. And the amendments that are before Council this evening in the official plan are proposing tweaks and changes to that list of community benefits. So it's my submission that the official plan amendment should also go along with that discussion on the bonusing. So specifically, it's Section 6 of the Urban Growth Center Zone to be deferred with Section 4.3 about bonusing, and that the official plan amendment also be deferred so that the three can be considered together as a related package at the May 13th Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee. So that's the gist of that submission, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that as well.
Okay, there don't appear to be any questions on that one. So maybe I will just ask staff to respond to that one, just so that we keep all these in context as we go along. Mr. Sloan?
Sure, to the mayor, our position is that we would like to see and proceed with the urban growth center zoning at this time. We need to get as much of this done as possible. The bylaw with the urban growth center zones in it would comply with the official plan. It would be very helpful to have for a number of development proposals and applications that we have right now. There are some that could take advantage of the new parking regulations and provisions that we're bringing in. And it does actually then put a little bit of pressure to then make a decision on the downtown bonusing in short order so that we can have it to complement the urban growth center zoning. So that's where we're at right now.
Just to be clear, though, if it was simply deferred till May 13th, would that be a big problem?
To the mayor, if council's inclined to do that, then staff could work with that. It's not our preference right now.
Okay.
The bylaw that's before you tonight does not include that separation, so the urban growth center zones are in there. But if council is inclined to defer that, then we would also need to know whether or not you're inclined to defer the proposed amendments to the official plan that relate to bonusing tonight. Then if so, then we would highlight which ones, and we could bring those forward so that we're clear on what part of the amendment moves forward and what doesn't.
Okay, thank you. So that's up to council to consider if anyone wants to move that on behalf of the delegation. Okay, so that's it, Ms. Price?
That's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We'll next move on to Michelle Desrosiers from DGF Group. Welcome, Ms. Desrosiers.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here tonight on behalf of the DGF Group of Companies. I spoke at the Planning and Strategic Initiatives meeting on the 15th, and I'm here to speak again about 491, 525, and 563, just to give you an update. So during the last PSI committee meeting, staff responded to the concern we had regarding our smaller property, which is 491 Highland Road, which is right at the corner of Highland and Westmount. And at that time, they reconfirmed the recommendation for this property to remain mixed-use designation, basically because it's on a transit corridor and a community node. I took that recommendation back to the owners, and initially I had presented to you a number of concerns. But on reflection, we have thought about it, and we really don't see any changes up to that property in the near future, and therefore we are prepared to accept the mixed-use designation and the mixed-use zoning on 491 Highland. So I'm pleased that that's been resolved. That leaves us really with one final issue, And this is the restrictions this is the restrictions placed on residential uses in the commercial zoning. Within the new commercial zoning designation, we are only allowed to add residential in the form of a mixed-use building. And more specifically, it prohibits us from putting any residential units or related residential amenities on the ground floor. The owners are particularly concerned about this, as I discussed last time. If we are in a position where we find ourselves that we cannot rent our commercial space and we've decided to introduce a mixed use or commercial building, we need something that is economically viable. And we are particularly concerned that the prohibition of the ground floor apartments and related amenities will result in a development of commercial space that will be hard, if not impossible, to lease. To ensure the owners fully understand the impact of these regulations, they have decided they'd like to undertake a study to determine if their concerns are valid. They have also asked us to contact staff and see if they could provide us with any research really to support their position. So basically, I'm here tonight asking for more time to get further research to these issues. We don't think people really understand the impact of, for example, not being able to have a meeting room on the ground floor of your apartment, not being able to have a storage area on the ground floor of that apartment. We don't understand the reason for these restrictions. So what we're asking for tonight is either more time as an overall to look at these two specific issues, or if the city does not share our broader concerns, then we ask specifically that the zoning on 525 and 563 Highland Road be deferred until we can properly review the impact of the following regulations in the COM2 zoning. And I'm not going to bore you with reading them out. I've put them up on the screen on the overhead. In the OP, the section that refers to this is section 15D.5.17B. And then in the zoning, it's regulation 3 in table 9-1 in the COM2 zoning, which I'll read. And it states that the dwelling unit shall be located within a mixed-use building containing at least one other permitted use, and except for access shall not be located on the ground floor. This is what we are hoping to have some more time to review, or I guess specific to our zoning to have it deferred until these two issues can be further explored. We thank you for your continued consideration and assistance in helping with our zoning.
Okay, we do have some questions for you. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for coming in again, Mr. Rossier. I appreciate your interest in this, and I appreciate that you've thought about the mixed-use zoning for the one property at the corner, and that's really great. So thank you for that. So I'm prepared to move your motion here for you in terms of asking for the deferral. I'm wondering if perhaps staff can comment on the regulations around whether or not you can have a mailroom on a main floor. If you could kind of expand on that and explain that for us, would be great.
Go ahead.
Through the Mayor, so to the question as to what's allowed on the ground floor, the provisions say except for access. So you could have a lobby, you could have your entranceways, those could all be included as part of your residential dwelling units, but no, you couldn't have a meeting room or another, I guess, congregation place. Those would not be permitted on the ground floor. They could go in the basement or the upper floors, but just not on the ground floor. But a mailroom would be permitted as part of the lobby as well.
Okay, so really there's no flexibility in terms of anything other than having retail and commercial space, and that could be office space. I'm assuming it doesn't have to necessarily be retail.
Through the Mayor, correct. It does not have to be retail. It would be any of the commercial uses that are permitted in this commercial zone, and that's primarily the purpose of the commercial zone, is to have these commercial uses, especially on the ground floor of the commercial buildings. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Councillor Johnson?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Yeah. Oh. I'm just curious about the date that you're looking to, I don't see a date specified here.
Yes, I prefer, if possible, if it could be a date in June. I'm sorry, I don't know what your schedule is, just for personal reasons. I'm not going to be here in the next 10 days, so it'd be making it very difficult to come back before you in May.
What about May 27th?
I will take whatever I can get. Yeah.
That's much further from 10 days from now.
I appreciate that, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, because, we will be fine. I'm just suggesting that as a date, but if that's not amenable
if it
to...
would be possible to have a June date, that would be preferred, but I will respect whatever council decides.
I think...
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do, we've moved things either to May 13th, which is the committee date, or May 27th, which is the council date when all of this will be ratified by. So I think if we can shoot for the 27th, I think...
27th would be fantastic, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming in, Mr. Rossier.
Thank you.
Our next delegation then is Jane Peller. Welcome, Ms. Peller.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jane Peller, and I live in the Schneider Creek neighborhood, which is found in Ward 9, and we are part of the Mill Courtland Community Centre. Tonight, I would just like to speak a little bit on behalf of some of my fellow Martin Street neighbors who have an interest in the topic of appropriate transitions in general. Parts, Crosby, secondary plans, tall building workshops, urban design charrettes, they're just some of the ways we have been engaged as residents, and just a few examples of the types of opportunities we have had to share our ideas. Ideas that could influence the future shape of growth that will have an impact on the livability of our established neighborhoods. Growth that could be guided through zoning and amendments to continue to support the charm and unique character we have while allowing for the addition of new development. The meeting of the old and the new is of prime interest to us, for it is in these areas where properties are directly affected by the change. It is in these transitions, in the interface, where we are all challenged. To make these transitions mutually successful, we will need to find compromise, seek creative, innovative solutions, make use of zoning rules and planning tools, such as setbacks, stepbacks, massing, podiums, and the use of the urban design manual to generate building design that is visually stimulating, sympathetic, and respectful to its surroundings, while still fulfilling our obligations for future development and growth. We believe that a balance between the needs of existing neighborhoods, developers, and city growth can be achieved together. It is the sometimes unenviable mission of our capable planning department to find that balance, to take what they have heard from all parties and reflect these needs and wants into a vision of many possibilities. It's very important to us to feel that our community and others are heard, and that zoning reflects our comments where possible and sensible. Having said that, we realize that it is our challenge to find and work toward compromise. We have seen the results of community input in one way or another throughout many projects, and it is truly gratifying, and we are very thankful for the opportunities. We want to congratulate our planners, and especially Brandon Sloan and Dana Edwards, and I see Richard here today too, as many of other people are here. We just want to congratulate them on their efforts to ensure a healthy, thriving future for our city through these zoning bylaws. Clearly, there has been many thoughtful hours devoted to Crosby, and we are pleased to see many positive and necessary changes to our zoning. We look forward to the secondary plan process, where individual neighborhoods will be able to add further comment on community or site-specific items, such as this crucial topic of appropriate transition. The amendment proposed tonight by Mr. Yeager just makes the Planning Department's intention to further consult with stakeholders on transition part of the zoning bylaw. It provides written direction to do so, which can only bring further opportunities to achieve mutually beneficial guidelines. We'll be advocating tonight for the acceptance of this amendment, and we are truly supportive of the proposed zoning detailed in this portion of Crosby. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for coming in tonight and for adding your perspectives, and there are no questions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Our next delegation is Nicholas Spence. Welcome, Mr. Spence.
Thank you for having me. Good evening. I am also here to speak about my concerns about appropriate transition. I live in the Cherry Park neighborhood and attended the KW secondary plan or hospital secondary plan open house. My home is adjacent to properties that will be zoned Mix 4 SP3. Which could result in my current view of a two-story multi-use building and a parking lot at grade with a 10-story building located much closer to my home. I've taken the time to participate in this meeting just to express my concerns with the details or lack of details around appropriate transitions between low-rise residential and other zones. I also have heard the intent is to address these concerns through future consultation, but I also support Mr. Yeager's proposal that be included in the amendments to the bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. And there don't appear to be any questions. So thank you for coming in, Mr. Spence. And our last delegation this evening is Mr. Chris Pidgeon from GSP Group. Welcome, Mr. Pidgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I have an overhead as well. If you could turn it one rotation to the left. Thank you. Perfect. So, members of council, this evening or today we submitted a 16-page letter with attachments on behalf of Schlegel Urban Development Corporation. And our request to you, it's a simple ask to defer 19 properties that are listed on that letter. And I don't want to take you through the letter. I just want to highlight an example of Crosby and the implications of Crosby. So what you have on the screen before you is the Williamsburg Town Center. So Fisher Holman Road at the top of the page, and at the right-hand side is Max Becker Drive. And the submission that I made, I tabbed the page for you. It's a blue tab. If council were to turn that up, it'll be a simple explanation. So the graphic on the left is the air photo that you have before you. At the top of the page shows you the built buildings and the built parking in the Williamsburg Town Center. So that's as it exists today. And at the bottom of the page are new buildings, so labeled Future Building 500. You can see that there's some parking that gets displaced and parking built around it. And then Building 700 below that. So again, there's parking to the north and to the south, to the east and the west, which happens to be Main Street. So Building 700, a site plan application is in process at the city, so the transitional regulations of the zoning bylaw would apply. The problem is, in Crosby, there's a maximum parking regulation that applies to this site, and the future building number 800 that is shows the red area, so there would be no parking that would be permitted as a result of the Crosby. for the future development of this master planned community, we would have to go through a further process to have that additional parking developed. So if you look at the other graphic on the right-hand side, so this is a second example, so this is across the street. So this is at Westmount and Fisher-Hallman Road. So again, there's building 500 that's identified. And you can see on the air photo there's a pad there for it. Again, there's maximum parking regulations that are proposed, and this would not allow that additional parking to be built to facilitate or support that future use. So we have 19 properties that we've been monitoring through the 4 years of Crosby. We've made over 15 letter submissions to the city. We're cross-referencing between the three versions of Crosby. We got the final version on October the 1st, and we just simply need some more time to go through and identify if there are any other issues. And Mr. Mayor, I've got a couple of other comments that I learned this evening. This zoning bylaw, I'm going to say, is 90 to 95% complete. I think staff have done a good job. I think we could spend a bit more time, and we could solve almost all of the issues that you've heard. I heard tonight, for example, the Salvation Army, that staff are willing to work with them through the transition policies. We've got some built product in the city. I identified Lot 42, 353 Manitou. They're both built. They comply with the existing in-force zoning regulations, but staff are not prepared to identify them in the new Crosby as a permitted use. And I have a problem with that. Finally, I also heard tonight on the bonusing, and I was at the April 15th meeting. I heard Mr. Sloan say that the base FSR in Uptown is 3.0 and you can bonus to 8.0. I heard Mr. Bloom say that 8.0 is the base unless you want to go through a public process. What I don't understand, and no one's been able to answer the question, is if we're at 8.0 and you've used all the bonusing provisions, how do you get above 8.0 if that's the base? So I think we've got 5% of a zoning bylaw that still needs a little bit of work, and a request some further opportunity for discussion with the city. Those are my comments.
So you referenced Lot 42, and what was the other property?
I'm sorry?
You referenced Lot 42.
And 353 Manitou Drive.
Sorry, and which property is that?
That's Great Canadian Vacations, and okay. I indicated they have 6 businesses there.
Yep.
2 are currently permitted, but Crosby won't recognize them on the go forward.
Okay, thank you. We have several questions for you. Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Pigeon, did you refer to Uptown Waterloo mistakenly?
Did I say Uptown Waterloo?
Yeah.
I apologize. I know where I am.
Here we are talking about Kitchener.
We're in Kitchener.
Okay. So the parking maximums that you're referring to are, they seem minor to me. Don't you think that they would be, if we did end up going ahead as they are written, wouldn't they just be a minor variance?
I don't have any indication that staff would support a minor variance. It's a process that's unnecessary because the current zoning that applies to the site would allow this parking to be built.
Say it again?
The current zoning, the in-force zoning that applies to the site, would allow this parking to be built.
Right.
These master plan communities, both of these examples, were before council when they were approved. Now the regulations are changing. I don't think maximum parking has a place in the suburban area. I think maximum parking is appropriate in downtown, but out in these areas, I just don't think it's a reasonable regulation to impose.
Okay. Perhaps we could ask staff to comment on what would likely constitute, if there's any clear guidelines, I'm not sure if we've given that any thought as to what would be a minor variance, or if staff could put their, if not, then I think it would be helpful if staff would put their minds to that over the next iteration of Crosby to help us understand what would be a minor variance in terms of an overage of maximum parking.
Okay, will staff want to respond to that now, or we'll come back to staff. Sorry, Mr. Sloan, what do you?
To the chair, to the mayor, we can wait until the delegation's complete and questions, and then we could address.
We have several other questions from council, so we'll wait till the end. Councillor Galloway-Seelock, you're up next.
Yes, I'm just trying to, understanding we got this at a late hour, that we're just trying to get through some of what your concerns are. So I'm noticing that there's also problems with the electric vehicle parking. Can you just quickly go through what some of the concerns are?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So attached is a report that was prepared by Dillon Consulting from Ottawa, and it's with regard to the electric vehicle parking. And what has been proposed is there are not electric vehicle parking. There are 4 different types, and the zoning bylaw Crosby doesn't recognize the various types that are available. So electric vehicle parking, and I'll use a simple example. If you had an electric vehicle parking at a variety store, so a convenience variety store, highly unlikely that it's going to be used. No one's going to go in to buy a bag of milk and plug their vehicle in. And quite frankly, it's not going to do anything in terms of the charge. So I just think we need to take a little bit more time with regard to the EVP standards that are in the Crosby, a little bit more research. We provided this Dillon report as information for staff to consider, and I just think that a little bit more time would result in a better series of regulations that could be imposed.
Are there any of the regulations that you see in Crosby that might better align with the urban design guidelines?
In fact, the new urban design guideline that's in circulation, we believe there are some conflicts between Crosby and the new urban design guideline. Of course, it's not coming to council for a decision until the fall. So I suppose, but we want to make sure that they're in sync.
Okay. I guess just that's all my questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. I think that due to the complexity and the size of this development and the fact that you had this already going before the Crosby zoning was released, I think that it would be prudent to defer this to May 27th. So at the right time, Mr. Mayor, I'd be supportive of deferring this.
Okay, and you're speaking with respect to the Schlegel developments, or also Lot 42 and 353 Manitou? They're separate. You realize they're separate developments? Okay. That's fine. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, my question's been answered by Councillor Michaud. I was wanting to add the Lot 42 and the Manitou properties, so she'll...
Okay. Thank you. Okay, those are all the questions we have. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Pidgeon. Councillor Marsh, you had questions of staff, I believe. Councillor Marsh?
Would there be any staff direction about a percentage of overage of parking or a number of spots that would be above the maximum that might constitute a minor variance?
Mr. Sloan?
Through the mayor, the questions about committee of adjustment and minor variance and whether or not it's some other application, a lot of them are dealt with on a site-specific basis and whether or not they meet the 4 tests and how they're justified. So each one is different and considered on its own merits. There is no one magic number. If needed and if appropriate, it would be helpful, I guess, from staff perspective, if we could help clarify some of the information on the past delegation and provide some of our input, but I'll defer to the mayor to that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, I just want to further elaborate on, so that I can understand better the difference between Crosby and the urban design guidelines and why some regulations are being brought forward through Crosby versus through the urban design guidelines.
Sure, through the mayor, there's a few reasons. Number one, they are different tools that we can use in the development process. The second one is that for all development citywide, where it's important to set a minimum expectation, that's when something enters into the zoning bylaw. So if we want to set a minimum base, a minimum expectation that, okay, there's going to be no blank walls on these transit areas and pedestrian-oriented streetscape that we're trying to create in certain nodes and corridors, then we have a certain minimum percentage that we put in the zoning bylaw. Urban design guidelines may set expectations and guidelines for different areas of the city or to go beyond that. The urban design guidelines have a number of different expectations for development. They're not all in the zoning bylaw. There's only a small percentage that actually make it into the zoning bylaw.
Can I further try to elaborate on one specific that I just want to touch upon, and that's window openings within buildings? How come that would be something that would be within Crosby, and where does that percentage come from?
Through the mayor, and some of my planning colleagues may want to supplement what I have to say, but we've spent 4 years working on this, including in the mixed-use areas in the urban growth center. So some of the window openings and the facade openings is part of the expectation of establishing more of active streetscape, active frontages, having uses and permeability between what's at the street and pedestrians and cyclists and those taking transit and what's happening on the ground level. Within the suburban area, it's a different number. It's not as high, or some may say as stringent, as in, let's say, King Street and our main King Street experience downtown. We have a number of urban design professionals and urban design staff. They've looked at it. They've looked at development applications. They've looked at what we have, and what you have before you is what the staff recommendation is at this point. If we would like to talk hopefully about some of the specific properties and some of the other information, then we can provide more information about that, and maybe as it relates to some of these regulations.
I just wanted to follow up on that, and sometimes what I'm trying to gather, and this document is huge, and I appreciate all the work that staff have done bringing it forward, and you're bringing forward your best information and knowledge, and I appreciate that. But I'm trying to translate that into the reality of building, specifically within the suburban area. And some of my concerns are that some of these may not be achievable, and then what is that going to do to our commercial development? We'll have tons of residential, but we might not have the commercial development to go along with it because our regulations are so high. So I'm just trying to balance that. Like, I can give you an example. A grocery store might not be able to hit the maximum or hit the minimum amount of window space because it's a grocery store and they need more of a closed building. So so that's where I'm struggling. How do the regulations really look in reality?
To the mayor, the short answer is, and we worked with the delegation on this to amend the properties that, some of the properties that they have brought forward tonight so that they're commercial zoning. The commercial zoning doesn't have that requirement.
Okay.
In the zoning. Only the mixed use does. So we have taken that into account that there are important commercial sites, especially in the suburban area, and may not be able to achieve that. So in that case, it's only an urban design guideline. In the mixed use transit areas, that's where it enters into the zoning. And so many of the properties, including what was brought forward tonight, we have amended to the version that you have before you that it's commercial.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay. It seems we've been through all the delegations, and I think just before we move into the motion and the additional deferrals that are being considered and proposed tonight, I just will say that clearly a lot of really good work has gone into this over the last several years from our staff, from participation from property owners, and from the public at large to get to the document that's before us. And I think, quite frankly, having, not having been around the last time we did a zoning bylaw, probably the only person who was here on staff at the time was, I think, Councillor Gazzola, you were here for 85-1, right? Yes, but in a finance role, so he probably wasn't paying a whole lot of attention, in fairness, to this planning document. But I think it's fair to say that a whole lot of really good work has gone into it. And the second piece is I'm pleasantly surprised, even with the additional requests for deferrals tonight, how little actually is being deferred between committee day and potentially today to deal with the remaining issues, some of which may be resolved, some of which just may require additional clarification, and some that ultimately may come down to a council decision on the 27th, depending on what happens between now and then, if these are all deferred. So I will come to you first, Councillor Marsh, and I'm going to ask you to move the recommendation from Planning Committee, including the two staff-sponsored amendments as part of the original motion, so those relating to 72 St. Leger and 108 Aaron Street, except for you can't move the pieces that are related to any that you have a conflict with, or, and obviously Councillor Singh has a conflict with. I will just start in terms of the two conflicts. Councillor Singh and Councillor Marsh, are either of the additional ones, any of the additional ones that we're going to be considering for deferrals tonight, are you impacted by either of those? No. So I'll get you to move the main motion, then I'll get someone else to move the pieces that you and Councillor Singh have a conflict on, and I'll deal with the conflict first, then I'll hold on to the main motion and deal with all the individual amendments. So over to you, Councillor Marsh. I know it sounds complicated, but
No,
I think I've got it figured out, and hopefully the clerk does.
Yes, exactly. So it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chapman that the report of the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee be adopted, specifically that the city-initiated official plan amendment attached as Appendix C to the previous report, which is associated with the new zoning bylaw, Stage 1, be adopted and accordingly forwarded to the Region of Waterloo for approval, and that a new zoning bylaw and associated mapping be approved as amended and as further amended tonight. Yeah, and that the Stage 1 of the new zoning bylaw does not represent, okay, never mind, that doesn't, do we need to say all these things out loud?
I think people can read them.
I think we all get it.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So it's been moved and seconded. I will now ask for someone to move and second the parts with a conflict. Councillor Galloway-Seelock, you're moving it. Seconder, Councillor Ioannidis. Okay. Councillors Chapman and Gazzola, do you have comments or questions?
I wanted to ask, I know it may take a little bit of time, but you only do this every 35, 40 years. I would like to have a recorded vote on everyone that we deal with. I know it will take...
I certainly will do that with all of the amendments, and then I'll do it with the whole piece.
Yeah.
And I'll do it with the piece that the two councillors have a conflict with.
Yes.
Does that work? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Councillor Chapman, you had a...
This may be a really dumb question, but I'm feeling like I was a bit slow off the mark on this one.
No questions dumb.
Okay, that's what I tell my students. With regard to the property on Agnes and Park, and the concern that was raised about the current zoning under, I'm not sure if that's part of the Crosby or part of the secondary plan. Is this something that can still be discussed, or is it something that has to be deferred in order to be discussed?
Through the mayor, that property is not subject to the bylaw tonight.
Okay.
Along with a few of the other properties that one of the delegation made tonight. So
two of the other ones are not part of tonight?
There's one of the delegations brought forward a list of up to 19 properties, and I think we've identified at least 6 of those are not subject to the bylaw tonight. So
they'd be part of the secondary plan? Is that the difference?
The Agnes and Park Street ones are part of our neighborhood planning review right now, correct?
Okay, thank you.
So to the mayor, just to clarify that, if there is a motion dealing with any of the deferrals recommended by Mr. Pigeon, staff just wanted to point out that we think at least 6 of those are not subject to the bylaw tonight. They're in the Rosenberg secondary plan area. So technically, and I'm sure the clerk would appreciate this, it would be good to clarify that, because we wouldn't be deferring it from anything because it's not before you tonight.
Okay, but you're saying you think they're not, as opposed to they're for sure not?
We're pretty sure. We can go through them, and maybe the delegation can confirm each one if we need to.
Okay, we can, or, I mean, if we're deferring something that doesn't need to be deferred, will simply mean that we won't deal with it then on the 27th, correct? I'm just trying to keep it simpler tonight.
We'll look to the clerk to help us out, but we are trying to scope the 27th as well, because we wouldn't be doing a report on those properties if they're not even in the bylaw.
Sure, but I think that will very quickly resolve those between you and the delegation outside of tonight in terms of is it or isn't it in there, is my suggestion. So, Councillor Singh, on...
yes, Mr. Mayor, I mentioned that I would be putting for deferral for 5...
I'll come back to you. I'll come back to those deferrals in a second.
Oh, I see.
Yes. So I'm now going to deal with the bylaw parts that Councillor Marsh and Councillor Singh have a conflict with. Okay? Are you looking to comment? No. Okay. So a recorded vote has been called. Is everyone clear? So we're purely dealing with the issues that Councillors Marsh and Singh have a conflict with. No, I'll do those amendments next, and then I'll come to the overall bylaw. And that's carried unanimously with the 2 noted conflicts. I'll now go through the amendments, and then people can, if I miss any, people can correct me. The first one I'll deal with is Councillor Marsh's motion with respect to Mr. Yeager's presentation.
Thank you. I was wondering if we could ask staff to put it on the screen. So it has always been my understanding as a councillor that represents areas where low-rise residential neighborhoods are right near high-rise zoned areas, and I've been in conversation with staff about this for years. It's always been my understanding that we would be working towards making sure that site-specific considerations are made so that there's appropriate transitions. And so to that end, I'm happy to bring forward this suggested motion that to further address and ensure an appropriate transition of maximum building height between adjacent and proximate zones, planning staff prepare site-specific provisions or modifications to the zoning bylaw through a consultative process. This may occur through the review of specific neighborhoods, like we're doing right now with secondary plan areas, and or future stages of the new zoning bylaw.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Chapman. Yes, Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'm supportive of this in principle. I have a question of staff because I kind of want to understand. So presumably there's areas zoned where, like supposing there's a whole block that's already low-rise residential and a developer acquires a parcel in the middle and that whole block is intended to be intense. Would this mean that a block in the middle, for example, would be restricted, but then I guess the problem is that, like, how do you work out the fairness? Because then the next door neighbor who fought against it and forced it to be lower could sell and consolidate and not be part of that process. So I guess how does staff work through this? Like, if I could have an example, it would help give you some comfort.
Mr. Sloan.
Through the mayor, this is the work that we are conducting right now. So we've been going through a consultative process with each of the central neighborhoods. And so I'll give you an example. Weber Street, Water Street, Victoria Street. So where you see a lot of these transition conditions, sometimes in a mixed-use area or a medium or high-rise residential, these are areas we've already identified in the past. We've already dealt with these in the past, to be honest, in our existing zoning bylaw through the mixed-use corridors. So there already are existing provisions to some extent about this. We have the approved parts plans that identify where you have some additional areas that we have as mixed use that are adjacent to low-rise res. So it's more about those edge conditions, not necessarily the instance that you mentioned. When looking at it from a broader perspective over the entirety of the bylaw, it was identified that there's some of the larger commercial sites that don't have a height limitation or near low-rise res. But in those circumstances, like, we've looked at each of the large power center areas, and there's only one adjacent low-rise residential property, and the development's already been built. So it's somewhat limited, and yes, we haven't introduced that right now, so we haven't gone through that process with those landowners. So that's why we're indicating that in a future stage of the bylaw, both when we're doing these neighborhood-specific reviews, and each context is different, the shadow implications are different in each area, so they may need different site-specific provisions, that we'll do that. Or in a future stage of the bylaw, we may come back and look at another zone, perhaps, that we found may have more instances adjacent to low-rise res, but we'd like to do that through a full process that involves that landowner of that zone land. So that's why we're suggesting in a future phase.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Singh on this?
So yes, so further that, hearing your comments, I'm looking at the motion that we're currently would be taking a decision on. Is it in keeping to what staff are saying and a body of work that's already underway, or reviews that would be conducted through additional processes? Or is this motion giving direction to a whole new way of looking at things?
Through the mayor, what you indicated first was correct. This is exactly what staff are already doing and already committed to doing and already in the public process of doing. But to help with some reassurance, I think, with some of the neighborhood individuals, Because they haven't seen the detailed bylaw wording that's coming for their neighborhood yet, that's coming in the next couple months. Okay. And so this just gives some reassurance, and therefore staff can live with it.
In other words, it allows us to move forward with this phase, and their concerns will be addressed as part of this next phase.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. Everybody clear? So I will deal with this recommendation first then, and a recorded vote has been requested. And that's carried unanimously. Okay, the next one, Councillor Singh, the deferral that you were going to be bringing forward.
Yeah, it's quite simple. I'm not sure if it needs to be put up, but in consideration of the retained parcel of 525 Ehrenbrook, be deferred to future stage of residential comprehensive review of zoning bylaws as to what staff had recommended.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Michaud. Any discussion? I know, that's why I'm waiting before I call the vote. Okay, so it has been moved and seconded. All those in favor momentarily in a recorded vote. Go ahead. Seconder was Councillor Michaud. And that two is carried unanimously. Okay, we'll next move on to the request with respect to Section 6 of the Urban Growth Zone and the OPA amendments. There was a request from the delegation that was from, that was from Ms. Price. A deferral of that and the OPA amendments to May the 13th committee day. Is somebody prepared to move by Councillor Ioannidis? Is there a seconder? Councillor Schneider? Okay. Yes, Mr. Sloan.
Just to the Mayor, a point of clarification. So if you're considering dealing with a deferral of Section 6 Urban Growth Center zones, I'm correct in that? Is that what's before you, or are we dealing with this particular one that got shown?
No, I'm dealing with Section 6.
Okay, so through that, we would also just want to clarify.
This is the next one.
Yep. So just
to ignore what's on the screen.
Sorry, just to clarify then, if council is considering a motion about deferring Section 6 of the Urban Growth Center zones, we would also want to clarify and all of the properties to which it applies. So there's 487 downtown properties that would be deferred. So we just want to make sure that the property zoning applied and the section being deferred are all considered together as one.
Okay.
Just logistics.
Okay. So that was part of your motion, Councillor Ioannidis? Okay. Thank you. Questions? Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I recall you indicated, Mr. Sloan, that you weren't necessarily in favor of this, but I guess I need to ask the question, given the context of the bonusing discussion we might have, is it possible that something might come out of that would affect, in your opinion, the urban growth center zones?
Through the Mayor, we don't believe so, because the bylaw has to conform to the official plan. The official plan has the floor space ratio and other parameters in it, so we don't foresee that changing. But if council is inclined to put it together as one package to defer till next month, then staff could live with that for now.
Okay, thank you.
No, and essentially what we're looking at is a 2-week deferral. Councillor Marsh?
Just if I could ask for further clarification, are there potential development projects that would potentially be held up specifically because they're waiting for us to approve this and now we're deferring it to a committee day, which then will be deferred then to a council day, so essentially we're deferring it a month?
Mr. Sloan?
Through the mayor, it's possible.
That's a possibility, and so but on the flip side, if we, so another follow-up question, if we approve the UC, the Urban Growth Centers, Section 6 now, despite these requests from the delegate, would that have any ramifications on potential development applications?
Through the mayor, yes, it would have implications. If somebody wanted to make a formal application in May and they were looking to do a development between an FSR of 3 and 8, if that's the area they're allowed up to 8, and they were going to use bonusing, they would have to wait a month until determining the outcome of the council decision on it.
Well, that's already, either way, if we approve it or don't, they have to wait on the bonusing. Is there any other implication that we're not understanding because we're not planning stuff?
To the mayor, through the mayor, there are maybe other implications. I mean, there's applications that could take advantage of the new parking requirements for downtown is probably the biggest issue that might come up. The number of development applications that might formally come in next month in the downtown is to be determined. But if they have to wait a month, it may or may not be a significant change.
Okay.
Maybe I'll follow up with a couple questions. Is it fairly safe to assume that the majority of projects that were going to come in the downtown probably came in time of, like the ones that are trying to move along quickly, probably came in ahead of the development charge exemption, and this, while it might have it might have some implication, it's not likely a significant one?
To the mayor, we did have a significant rush before the development charges exemption sunset, and while some may have predicted or assumed it would be low afterwards, it's not necessarily the case. We actually still have a number of proposals and applications, and I think you can see from standing committee that there was 2 downtown properties or blocks that were deferred because they are in the process of making applications right now. So we actually continue to get more applications.
Oh, which is a good thing. And
which is positive.
I guess my last question is, if we take the time to try to resolve these outstanding issues, it certainly would be faster than the potential of us finding ourselves in an LPAT hearing for any parts of this, which I guess is always an option for people, correct?
Staff are willing to work with council's decision on it.
No, but I mean, people could go into an LPAT hearing if they wanted to, right? Like that's part of the process.
Technically, anyone could appeal. We're hopeful that we're not in that situation.
Yeah, I would agree. But my point is that taking a couple extra weeks, in my view, if we can try to resolve this issue is better, and that's where I stand. So, Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment if I can. Yep. I'm not going to be supporting this deferral. I think that we have the opportunity to discuss bonusing when it comes forward in a couple weeks' time. And I respect Mrs. Price's submission and appreciate her time and energy on this. But I think we should move forward with this. It's a huge part of this document that's been worked on, and I think that we need to continue to move forward with this and not defer this specific request.
Okay. So it has been moved and seconded, yeah, it has been moved and seconded. So we will take the vote on it. And that is carried. Sorry, those in favor? Those opposed? And that's carried. We'll now move on to the one that's on the screen, or was on the screen, which is Westmount Highland. And Councillor Johnson, if you can click in. Because I think you said you wanted to move that one.
Yes, we had a good discussion about this earlier. I think that this is important to Ms. DeRosier, and her she'd like a little extra time to be able to take a look into this. So if we can give her until May 27th, would be great.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Michaud and Mr. Sloan.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just point of clarification. So what's on the screen, we're hopeful is not the entirety of the motion. So the section that's referred to, the official plan, is not before council tonight. That's in effect, so we can't defer that. Our suggestion is that there would be a period after the date so that the zoning of the properties indicated be deferred to May 27th period.
And then
the delegation can,
and then you'll work
whatever matters.
You'll work through the issues between now and then, or try to.
That's correct. We will continue to do that with the delegation.
Yep. Okay, so everyone clear? Is that, Councillor Johnson?
So which piece? Okay, so thank you.
No, everything after.
Everything.
So it'll end at be deferred to May 27, 2019.
Period.
Okay. Thank you.
Correct.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Stand by. If you can vote, please. And that's carried unanimously. And the last one, Councillor Michaud, if you can click in, please. And you indicated you wanted to move a deferral to the 27th on the Schlegel property request, Lot 42, 353 Manitou Drive, and...
That's it.
Sorry?
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So I make the motion.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Galloway-Seelock. Any discussion? We'll take a vote on that. And that too is carried unanimously. And now, Councillor Marsh, you're looking to speak, or?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. So, in the discussions with staff, I just want to clarify: would it be beneficial to staff to defer the majority of the things that were deferred, not the bonusing discussion, but the list of properties that are in the deferral motion, instead of to the 13th to the 27th, to provide more time for discussion with the proponents?
Mr. Sloan.
Through the mayor, yes.
Okay, so I'd like to move that we defer, that we just change the date on that deferral, that consideration of the following properties be deferred to the May 27th council meeting to allow additional time for consultation. And so that's the addresses that include 83 Elmsdale Drive all the way to the Ottawa Street properties.
Yep. But the bonusing piece will still come back.
I think we need
13th.
more discussion about the bonusing, and I think a committee meeting is going to give us more opportunity.
Agreed. So is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Johnston? Take a vote on that. And that's carried unanimously. And so, is there more?
Yeah, just
okay, go ahead.
well, what staff put forward at the initial part of our discussion tonight around 108 Aaron's and 72 St. Leger, I just want to confirm that those are part of the main motion.
Those are part of the main motion.
Okay.
So
great.
now we'll deal with the main motion, not including the properties with conflict as amended. A recorded vote. And that is carried unanimously. So to staff, I think you can go out and enjoy a beverage of your choice, but be responsible. Congratulations, everyone, and thank you to everyone from, once again, from the public and industry for your involvement in, as Councillor Gazzola said, this once every 35-year process. Well done. Thank you. Okay, so that takes us through all of our delegations, and we'll move on to the reports of the committees and Finance and Corporate Services. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Singh that the 5 items coming from Finance and Corporate Services Committee be adopted.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I would like to deal with number 1 separately.
Okay. Councillor Chapman?
I also wanted to speak to number 1.
Okay, so Councillor Gazzola, did you have comments to make, or?
Actually, I wanted to try to make a slight amendment to it.
Okay. Go ahead.
I would, we thoroughly discussed this last week, and it's a new tax that's coming into the community, and we've shown how we're going to allocate everything. I would just like to say, I would like to, instead of putting all of our 40% into a new reserve fund, I would like to take a quarter of our annual savings, our annual increased taxes, and divert those, let them flow right through to our tax base, so that with this, that our existing taxpayers get a little bit of a break also with this new tax that's coming into play. So if the estimates of 938,000, I think it is, that we're looking to accumulate from this, there would be about $94,000 going through to our tax base, back to our existing taxpayers. I appreciate that there are other savings that will come to them, but that's sort of a direct impact to them that they should feel something.
Is there I'll ask staff to comment on it, but first, is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Chapman, you're seconding it?
Sure.
Okay. So it has been seconded. On this, Councillor Davey? Question? Go ahead.
Well, first, obviously, I'd like to get staff's comment and response to the proposed motion. And Councillor Gonzalez, sorry, what was the percentage again?
I'm asking that 10% flow through to our taxpayers.
10% of the total amount, not the amount that the City of Kitchener gets.
I said a quarter of what...
Okay, can you click in,
Yeah.
Councillor Gazzola? There you go, go ahead.
No, the City of Kitchener is getting 40%, a quarter of that 10%, small amount.
Okay, thank you.
The City of Kitchener is getting 40%, but you're snuggling that away into a reserve fund. I'm just saying, let a little bit of that go through to our taxpayer.
Okay, before we move on to other councillors, Mr. Chapman, I see you clicked in.
Through Mr. Mayor, no, I anticipated a question, but if there's no question...
Well, there is a question. I indicated, and Councillor Davey would like to, I guess, hear staff's response to the implications of the proposed amendment.
So through Mr. Mayor, I'd make two comments. First, what Councillor Gazzola is proposing is permissible. It's up to Council to decide how to allocate its share of funds. The other comment I would make is that the support that this proposal currently enjoys from the industry is predicated on the assumption that 100% of the revenue will go for the benefit of tourism uses. I would say that to change that approach now would put us out of step with all other 6 municipalities within the region, and it might call into question the support that this has received from the industry. There were voices in the industry, loud voices in the industry, that wanted 100% of the revenue to go to the Tourism Corporation. The support for half of the funds to come to the municipalities, again, was based on the notion that we would use that for recreation and cultural purposes. That list is a fairly broad list and will benefit the community, but at the end of the day, that was the bargain that was reached with the industry. But as I've noted, certainly what Councillor Gazzola has proposed would be permitted. If that's Council's direction, then staff would implement that.
Okay, no further questions, Mr. Mayor, but I would like to comment, if I could, when the time's appropriate.
Go ahead now.
Oh, okay. Councillor Gazzola is proposing, I understand, and I understand also that it's going to come back to us to determine where to send these funds. The problem is it's very, very difficult for us to increase taxes sometimes to support like our arts and culture, some of the events that we really need to support in our community. And I would like to make sure that there isn't a desperate need for these funds before we allocate it. So I was, if we turn this down, it's effectively going to be a deferral because it's going to be coming back to us, I understand, in the not too distant future when we have a better idea of the amount of funds we're going to collect. So I'm not saying that I will never support what Councillor Gazzola is proposing. I just think we really need to really make sure that we're not acting in bad faith in terms of what these dollars are actually intended for.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh, on this issue? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And part of my question has been answered through Mr. Chapman, but I want additional clarification. Again, my presumption was that although this is being put into the reserve, part of future budgets, there may be dialogue or debate around this table as to how to allocate those monies, be it, as you've outlined, for arts, culture, or recreational. Through this direction or approval, are we committing that that is the only use that these monies could be committed towards, or is that still open for debate at a later point? And I don't think tonight is the opportunity, but I want to make sure that there is a future opportunity.
Mr. Chapman?
So I would draw your attention to two things. First, on page 3-1, the third motion that you'd be adopting tonight, I'm referring to the staff report, it would be the third clause in the motion. You would be directing staff to establish a reserve fund for uses which were outlined in Appendix B of the staff report. Appendix B was on page 17. It's a very broad list, but essentially in adopting that motion tonight, you would be expressing your intent to dedicate the funds for those types of uses. You are correct that a reserve fund policy will come back to a future council meeting where you will put further thought to that. But I think to Councillor Davies' point around acting in good faith, the assumption in the industry right now is that the uses of funds would be along the lines of what's included in that list, again, which is fairly broad.
Right, and some of that I do remember. If it was amended that although it's prescribed through the report of how those monies would be allocated, but it would be referred to the 2020 budget. Would that leave that discussion open without us necessarily giving full affirmation to what the staff recommendation is? That's where I'm concerned. I appreciate where Councillor Gazzola is going. As I said, tonight's not necessarily the night. I think that's should be debated. It should be part of the more comprehensive discussion around the budget, and that would be perhaps 2020. I just want to make sure that that avenue still exists. And if not, could we, through amendment, refer it to the 2020 budget?
So again, through the Mayor, as it stands right now, if you adopt the motion as printed, I think you're identifying a broad range of uses, and that would be the intended use of those funds. Certainly what you've asked and what Councillor Gazzola has raised, those are options that are available to Council. We wouldn't recommend them. And again, certainly, I think the whole intention of the tax was that it's used for cultural and tourism purposes to generate tourism visits to our community. And so what's being suggested would be a fairly significant departure. That said, it's within Council's purview, if that's the direction you'd like to go, to adopt that direction tonight.
Okay, thank you.
And perhaps, Mr. Chapman, you can put up on the screen Appendix B just to remind members of Council what that comprehensive list is. Councillor Chapman, you're next.
Well, I'm not speaking specifically to this motion. I had something else to add about the tax. Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so it's because I've been contacted by a resident, and the concern was around Airbnbs. So would they be taxed this 4% as well? And so there's no way that can be exempt, because I guess the big concern is that, that causes them to raise their fees substantially in order to accommodate that increase, that tax.
Mr. Chapman, can you speak about Airbnbs?
So my understanding is that they are viewed very much as hotel or other short-term rentals. The trend has been in most communities that have adopted the tax for it to apply to Airbnbs as well as to the conventional hotel and motel trade, and that would be the direction that we would be going and implementing it within the region.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you. Through you. Tonight we had 4 different arts and cultural groups come to speak to us tonight and let us know that their industry here is in need of money, and that we were being asked to support the arts in terms of our economic development group. We just had a presentation last week from the Waterloo Region Tourism Group, and how hard they're working with the funds that they have, and how needed these funds were to be able to compete against Hamilton, London, other communities that are trying to attract basically the same kinds of events and that to their areas. So I think that kind of changing this midstream after we've had a vote on it is not in the direction that we want to be going in if we're trying to attract these big festivals, etc., which at the end of the day is going to bring money back to our taxpayers because it's going to improve the economy of our community. So I would strongly urge you to keep it the way it is. Thank you.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, just a quick question for staff. Because we would be getting these additional funds, would that not end up saving the taxpayers dollars because they don't have to pay for these amenities, whether it's through capital or operating budgets?
Mr. Chapman.
I believe in part, yes, that where we would otherwise be making investments to attract events or expend money on infrastructure related to tournaments or bids for events, yes, this would defray that current cost to the taxpayer.
Okay. So we're already, my point is, well as Councillor Johnson made the point around what the economic benefit would be for us to have more people coming into our community, but also that we have what could be potentially up to $938,000 of savings a year, which saves the taxpayers that money. So I don't think we need to go down this road at this time, but it's always something that could be open in the future should, for some reason the reserve fund get too large or something to that effect. But I think we're just stepping into this right now, and we should just move forward with it as recommended by staff.
Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, just further to Councillor Chapman's question, I too have been approached by a few owners of Airbnb properties, and I was just wondering if we could get an update from staff ahead of the July 1st date, if they could just find out how it's going to be implemented by Airbnb and give us a heads up about the details.
Councillor Singh?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although I do appreciate the direction that Councillor Gazzola is trying to take, that any action that this council takes, that there should always be a direct, tangible benefit to the everyday taxpayer. But from the earlier comments, I think that is the missed point, that this is an endeavor where we are trying to overall animate and bring vibrancy to our community, which does cost money. Either we do it through our tax base directly from a residential taxpayer, or we do it through taxation through a different avenue like the hotel tax, which the residents or those that would be coming into our community in effect would be paying it, as opposed to property owners that live in our municipality. So I think we are necessarily talking about the same thing. I think we have to give opportunity to see exactly what we can do with these funds. I'm not so certain everything that's listed here is the all end all. I would hope that there would be availability of future dialogue around this table to see exactly what we can do with those monies to further, again, bring vibrancy and animate our community, or bring tangible benefit like additional improvements to recreational facilities where everyday residents can go and enjoy. And at the same time, as Councillor Galloway-Seelock has said, if we are quite fruitful with how this reserve ends up compiling, and there may be future opportunities to give some back to the taxpayers as well. But that is not for tonight. I think this is a good step forward to build this type of reserve.
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, we agree and give council comfort on that. That is the intention of the last two motions in the recommendation. One, that there will be a report at the 1-year mark on the implementation, and then in 2022 a comprehensive review in partnership with tourism that we believe will lead to refinements of the program at that point in time, which could include the cost allocation or the sharing between the partners.
Councillor Chapman on this again?
Yeah, I'd like to make a closing comment on this, and I'm not really disrupting the apple cart here. The agreement was that half the dollars go to our tourism operation, which is going to double the amount of dollars that they will have to spend in the future. Will double what they've got to spend. So there's a great deal of money already going into tourism because of this. A portion of it slipping back to the region. So I'm really asked, and I'm not sure, I haven't heard what the rest of the area municipalities are doing with their 40%. I haven't heard that. I don't know what they are. So we've decided to put it away in a reserve fund. And I have no problem with that. I'm simply asking, a token of showing our taxpayers that we do care about them, and to let $93,000 flow through to the tax base. Very little impact on what we're doing, very little impact on the amount of new dollars that are coming in. Just a bit of a sign to our taxpayers that we're here for them and we're concerned for them. So, Thank you.
Mr. Chapman? Sorry, I thought you wanted to, no? Well, no, I realize, Councillor Gazzola, you're right, it absolutely is, and council will make that decision, Councillor Gazzola. That's what, no, it's not over. I haven't spoken yet, Councillor Gazzola. Okay, so thank you, you've made your points. First of all, with respect to your question in terms of how these dollars are going to be spent, I think it is quite clear. There's a list in front of us that is part of Appendix B that references how these dollars are going to be spent. I can appreciate where you're proposing to want to go with this, but I think we need to remember is that we're part of a regional family here, and this has been part of a broader discussion that has involved all of the municipalities, and I really don't think it would be beneficial to this municipality or to the relationship with all of our colleagues to be an outlier and to be going in a different direction right now than those municipalities are going. I also think it would not be helpful for us in terms of the relationship with the private sector, who admittedly has had some reservations around implementing this. And it in fact is the approach that has been negotiated through our staff and the tourism agency and so on that has gotten them on board, coupled with the fact that this is in existence in other larger jurisdictions and has been for some time, with those dollars being used to attract conventions to their community, to attract large sporting events, and to invest in festivals and arts and culture events. I think we can't lose sight of the fact, and I will be very blunt with this council. We have, and we heard a smidgen of it tonight, but we have a large number of arts and culture organizations that are struggling. And those struggles, quite frankly, are only going to get worse. I mean, we heard that the Ontario Music Fund has been cut by 50% in the coming year. It's only going to get worse in the next while. And if we want to ensure that we not only continue to try to grow these things, but more importantly, that some of these festivals and events merely survive going forward, it's going to take all of these dollars. And quite frankly, I'll be happy if it doesn't take more than that, because I think it very well might. So I unfortunately cannot support the amendment, and I'll support the motion in its present form. So a recorded vote has been called on the amendment. Those in favor? Those opposed? And the amendment does not carry. The motion as amended, did you want that as a recorded vote as well? Sorry, right, thank you for correcting me. The motion in its present form. Recorded vote, okay. And that's carried unanimously. The balance of the Finance and Corporate Services report, those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Community and Infrastructure Services, Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dave Schneider that items 1 through 7, as we've already dealt with 8, be approved.
Yeah, I want 7 dealt with separately.
Number 7? Okay. And go ahead. you have a question or comment?
Yes, I want the third and fourth paragraph to be dealt with separately. I don't care about the other, the rest of it. And I'd like a recorded vote. Yeah.
Okay.
And if I can just comment,
yeah, go ahead.
I didn't support this at committee. I'm totally in support of where we're going with what we're doing and what we're trying to do, and how we've been very successful at it, and I'm sure there's always more that we can do. I did not support. We just started a new division last year with this year. I'm not sure it was this year or last year with a new staff member, and here we are. We're hardly getting into it, and we're doubling up. I asked at committee if we couldn't go along at least for another year or so without adding new staff, and that was my opposition to that. On the other issue of changing our basis, for design, going away from the LEED Gold standard to a new standard, which is a very good standard. I have no concerns with it. I would like to see it happen more. This net zero energy, and I would like to see it happen not only in the public buildings but also in the private sector. But there's no question that it will cost additional funds and when we get into those capital projects. And I'm saying rather than at this point to just wave a wand and say that's the direction we go into in the future, I ask that we deal with that on a case-by-case basis as we go forward in the future. Because whatever direction you go into, and it will cost anywhere from 10 to 20% more for these buildings that we're going to build, and that payback we've been told can be paid back from 7 to 10 years or so, whatever the thing is. But it's a question of if we put this in place, we don't know how big a building we're going to be dealing with and how big that differential is, and can we afford to do it? And we need to decide that at that time, not holus bolus tonight for the next Lord knows how many years. So I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying let's deal with that on an individual basis when the occasion arises.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I would agree with Councillor Gazzola's second part, but I think it does read like it is. Let's deal with the situation as it permits. It literally says at the end of that clause where site conditions allow. So that would give us the ability to decide whether it's appropriate in those instances or not. I just want to speak to the greater point, and it's one it's become more frustrating, I guess, for me over the years, and that's the idea of supporting a body of work and then not providing the staff people to carry out the work. You cannot have it both ways. If you support the Corporate Climate Action Plan and the principles herein, you can't not support the staff that we require to implement it. You have to pick one. Clearly you're not, Councillor Gazzola, and that's your prerogative, but the reality is if you haven't indicated an area elsewhere in the corporation where you want to pull a body. You simply said you want the work to be magically done when staff have very clearly said they need the person there to do the body of work. So this is something I've bit my tongue on in the past, and it frustrates me. This is a time that I feel like I need to call you on it, Councillor Gazzola. You either support the Corporate Climate Action Plan and the body of work that needs to be done, or you do not.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, I quickly just wanted to add my support for the Corporate Climate Action Plan. We see what's going on in the world right now, and we have an opportunity to make a difference within our community, and I think we need to do that. And whether or not the Office of Sustainability is 1 year old or 20 years old, we have a plan here that can move forward, but we need another person to do that. And if we don't have that person, the work doesn't get done. And we know that our sustainability officer now, she's already overworked. She can't accomplish anything more within her days, within her amount of hours that she's allotted. And so we have to do more, and we have the ability to do more, and that this is actually going to pay for itself in the long run. So I will support this.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. I'd like to put the question out to put.
I think there's still a couple of people who...
I want to follow this rules, please.
I need to refresh my memories on calling it to question.
Just take a vote.
No, just hang on. Okay. Is there a seconder for that?
Sorry, one point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Davey?
Just in calling the question, are there implications that there was a clause deferred to today's date without... Actually, I guess not. So if we wanted to hear anything with respect to that clause, we would have to vote against the calling of the question. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so is there a seconder for calling it to question?
Is there a second?
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Singh. Okay.
Recorded vote.
Okay, Councillor Galloway-Seelow.
Sorry, I just want to be clear on what I'm voting on. I'm all for getting to the answer.
So if your vote now, yes, to call it the question, okay?
Yeah?
Then we will take the vote now, and there will be no further discussion, no further questions of staff.
But Councillor Davey raised that there's a deferred clause in here. Does that get affected at all?
Yes. So I think what you need to do is...
So I would have no problem calling the question.
Well, you don't have that choice.
I know. I'm just stating my
We're not
opinion.
debating calling it the question. I'm just providing...
I would put an amendment to a clear or not...
There's no amendment. Like, it's call it the question. Come on, folks, we were doing really well tonight.
Okay.
So
I have to vote against it
that is
because of
correct.
the deferred clause. Thank you.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Mr. Mayor? You can't. I can't? You don't want me to put it in two parts?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
So all those in favor of calling it to question? All those opposed? It's not called to question. Okay, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, now I'm all lost. Okay, so I would like to support the motion and the need for a full-time equivalent. Given the global environmental crisis that we live in, in fact, I think I'd like to see a timeline, and I don't know if there's such a thing exists. Maybe Mr. Reedman, you can speak to this with this deferred clause. Where there's a proposal to look at the city's ecological footprint. Are we talking a year from now, 6 months from now? When would this process begin?
Through the mayor, so the community climate action plan is being developed right now. So Ms. Bennett has indicated that she could take that to that committee and talk it through. As mentioned in my email, this is more of a community-focused level assessment and not a corporate-specific level. So that work is underway over the next year. It would be up to that committee to look at whether this is an appropriate tool to incorporate into that work.
So over the next year or next year? Sorry.
So the work is being done over the next year, so it will be completed within about a year's time.
Okay. So no, I would support the full-time equivalent.
Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you. So I do want to make sure that we are able to hear from staff with regards to that staff be directed to include in the Sustainability Office work plan a full municipal review of the city's ecological footprint. I know that when we spoke about this a couple weeks ago, one of the things that I brought up, I'd be happier to see more staff than the 2 that we're proposing now, and that one of the things that having that second staff person was going to be able to do was the opportunity to then look at partnerships, look at working with the universities, maybe design a program to work with co-op students from our 3 different institutions and make sure that they had supervisors. And as part of that, I think that we need to look at the review of what we can now do with that second person.
Okay, that appears to be all the comments. I'll just briefly make mine. I will obviously be supporting the motion. I'm very pleased to see this document going forward in its present form, and we'll be supporting all of the sections, including staffing. I think when it comes to net zero ready, net zero energy, I think we can't lose sight of the fact that the private sector locally is doing this. Cora has done that, and in fact, they're moving on with Evolve 2 now because Evolve 1 has been so successful. And it's incumbent on us, I believe, if the private sector can do it and can not only pay for it but also make a return on investment, it's incumbent on us to do that and lead and do the right thing for future generations in our community. I would concur that from a staffing point of view, you can't do this work and not expect to put staffing resources in it. And quite frankly, we could certainly be doing more. And there's in the federal budget alone, there was $350 million, of which we're going to be able to access $175 million of it through the GMF Green Municipal Funds in the future, particularly related to buildings and energy efficiency going forward. And so, I could quite easily argue that we're probably going to more than make this, position's salary back in future years by actually going ahead with it. Councillor Ioannidis, and then Councillor David, have you not spoken once already? Okay, Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovic. I just want to have one follow-up question on which we deferred about the opportunity for staff to provide a work plan, a municipal review. So what was that answer? I don't know. Did we get an answer for that?
Yes, we got an answer from Mr. Riedman, and the answer was that this would be looked at by the committee that's overseeing all of this work over the coming year.
Okay, that's great. So, yeah, this is not accurate. That's what's on the...
Because this is saying to do it. That's my question.
Yeah.
Mr. Riedman, can you help us here?
Through the mayor, so my response was to look at whether or not we do that community-wide. It wasn't committing to doing that body of work. So it is simple from an individual perspective, but from a community perspective, it is more complicated. So that is something that Ms. Bennett can take to the committee to ask to see if that's something that we can look at a community-wide scale.
Okay. As long as it's clear that that's what that is. So, anyways, can I make my own comments?
So, yeah, you can, but I just want to.
Yeah. You want clarification?
Yeah, because I'm not sure that wording says what you just said either, which may not be consistent with what Councillor Chapman wants, but I think we need to be clear on exactly where we're going.
Correct. It is a large body of work that we would talk to the broader community, so that's all of the municipalities that are participating in the Community Climate Action Plan, to look at whether this tool is an appropriate tool. Right now they have targets, so the 80% reduction by 2050 is the main goal that's being worked towards. This looks more broadly at food consumption, water consumption, energy consumption for the community, right. And sets an ecological footprint for that community. So as an example, some Western cities are about 100 times as large as their current footprint in terms of their consumption patterns. So from the research we've done since last committee date, I think only one city in Canada has actually done this, and that's Calgary. We have been looking into the scale of this work, but it's really up to that community group to decide whether or not this is work that they can accommodate within that work plan.
Right, so all you're committing to do is take this, if this is passed, is to take this to the group, have them look at it, and potentially put it into their work plan in the future.
Through the mayor, that's correct, if it's feasible for them to do that.
Can you clarify who the group is?
So it consists of Sustainable Waterloo Region and all the partner municipalities that are participating in the...
Oh, this is the Climate Action WR group. Yeah, okay, then that's where it should go, I agree. Okay.
Do you understand?
Councillor Ioannidis, you still have the floor?
Okay.
Are you clear on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead and make your comments, please.
Yeah, I think with regards to the Corporate Climate Action Plan, to me it's paramount that we move forward with this and give it the resources that we need. And I think the city needs to set an example. And when it comes to looking at buildings of net zero, we need to lead, and not the private sector when it comes to that. And any way that we can to move forward in that direction is something that I overheard, and I think many members here have also heard through the public consultation and through Environics and everything else, that the environment is one of our top priorities, and this would address that. So I think it's imperative that we just move forward with this. And
Councillor Davey, you're asking for some clarification?
Yeah, sorry. So I just want to be 100% clear, because what it's written here is not the same as what Mr. Reedman said, and I think it can be, some thought to it can be solved simply. I think right now it says that staff be directed to include. If we just change that wording to consider including, I think that might solve the problem, because otherwise staff is tied to doing that work and they're not sure yet. Okay.
Okay. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I'm still a bit confused. So when we talk about sustainability office, we're talking about not the sustainability office at the City of Kitchener?
No, so let me try to help and then jump in, Mr. Reedman. The process, the work that we do around climate change on a citywide level, not city as in the corporation,
no, I know,
but citywide level, right, is done collaboratively through Climate Action Waterloo Region, which includes Sustainable Waterloo Region, REAP, all the cities, the university. I mean, there's a whole bunch of partners that are in it. And so they guide that work. And the work that you're asking about in terms of an ecological footprint would really need to be done through them and that group's work, because it's broader than just what we as a city do. And we do that work collaboratively with the others. Is that... Yes?
Well...
Okay, go ahead.
Does it have to be? Like, can the city not determine its own ecological footprint? I mean, and I think there's more than just Calgary. I think Vancouver has also done this, and there are other cities across the country who've engaged in this sort of activity. So, I mean, it seems to be sort of passing the buck. Like, can the Sustainability Office not consider doing this? I know, we probably don't have the resources to do it a full-scale study, but why do we want to see this as just a regional thing? If we want to set an example, as somebody said earlier, this would be a great opportunity to encourage the other cities to do the same.
Mr. Reedman, sorry.
Through the mayor, so the scope of work that was outlined in Report DSD 19-094 was related to our corporate sustainability program, which is essentially our carbon emissions and our reduction strategy to achieve those. It's not intended to deal with the scope of work at the community scale. Our representative is Ms. Bennett, who does sit on that committee. But this work is very much outside of the scope of the Corporate Climate Action Plan. Should council wish for us to investigate this further, the appropriate body to look at that is a recommendation to that community level planning group, who's building out our backcasting plan to meet our 80% target, and to determine whether or not this is something that's achievable within that.
So can we get a report back on this, I guess? The response from that group, the community group?
Well, then I think that's what Mr. Reedman has indicated, is that they will take it back to the group And at some point over the next year, they will report back to us on that.
Well, just simply on whether they do it or not. Like, I'm not asking for the full report, but
No,
can we
no,
get
exactly.
a report back like in the next 2 months, saying that yes, we're willing to take this on, and no, we're not?
Mr. Chapman.
I'm just trying to push it a bit because I think that there's such value in having that assessment.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't going to wordsmith, but I think given the extent of discussion and the desire for clarity around the motion, I'll propose wording that I think reflects the discussion, and then I can put it on the screen if that would be helpful. But I think where council is landing in general is that staff be directed to work with the Sustainable Waterloo Region to explore the merit and feasibility of undertaking a full review of the city's ecological footprint and report back to council within the next year. So I think that achieves what you're looking for, perhaps with the exception of the time frame. And what I hear Mr. Reedman saying is that if we're to do this work in partnership with Sustainable WR and all of its partners, that will take some time to work with all of those stakeholders. But if we can collaborate on it to the point you made around encouraging our partners to rise to the same level of ambition, I think we'll be far more successful if we do it in partnership. And that will likely take 12 months for us to report back.
Is everyone clear? Okay, so somebody would actually have to move the amendment that Mr. Chapman is proposing. Moved by Councillor Galloway-Seelock, second by Councillor Ioannidis. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. All those in favor of number 7 as amended? Sure. Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, so we'll deal with paragraph 3 first. Councillor Gazzola, can I deal with 3 and 4 together? Okay, I'll deal with 3 and 4 together. Yes. And all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. The balance of the report as amended. Recorded vote. The balance of 7, sorry. Thank you. And that's carried unanimously. The balance of the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Planning and strategic initiatives we've already dealt with. Woohoo! Unfinished business. New business. I think the only new piece of business that I will report on from the region is the region has ratified the issue in terms of consumption and treatment sites. They're in the process of submitting their application to the province, and there will be a report coming to regional committee in a couple weeks to deal with the issue of a temporary site. And from what I understand, the region is looking at 3 options. One, a temporary site at Duke Street, a temporary site in a trailer on some piece of land, and I'm trying to remember what the third one is now. Oh, at a community health organization. And so they'll be reporting on that. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I just want to make a statement that I would like to have recorded if I can. It's to do with the crosswalk, the trainer area crosswalk over the LRT. There's been a bunch of social media issues on it, and I've talked to staff, and I even agree that I wouldn't even ask staff because we're right in the midst of negotiating for land. And it's really inappropriate to be discussing this at this point. So, but I do want to mention that staff, both here and at the region, are working very hard on that project.
And I would concur with your comments, and thank you for making them. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you, through you. So with regards to information around the safe consumption site, and now these temporary sites that are going to be coming, can we, is there a mechanism or more education or something that we can be doing as a council to make sure that we're on top of this? If there's any meetings or any votes or anything that need to happen, is there any further information that we should be making sure that we have?
So at this point, what I do know is that a temporary site, if granted, would not be funded by the province and would require permission from the federal government. The federal government's process will require them to communicate with the municipality where it would end up being. And I think we get 4 days or something to respond. And so that would be something that staff would deal with if there was a request for a temporary site from the region or for anybody for that matter. But there is no functional role for us as a council any further. It purely becomes an issue of the region acting as a board of health in dealing with a temporary site.
So we won't need to vote then on a temporary site as a city council.
That is
That's
correct.
something that the regional council will deal with.
That is
Okay,
correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. So just with the temporary sites, will this be on regional property then? Like you don't know where it is, where the temporary site's going to be
No, so
yet?
staff have been directed to look at options where that can be. And my understanding, judging by media reports and so on, is at this point staff are looking at a variety of options, including community health organizations, the Duke Street property, as well as the possibility of vacant pieces of land with a temporary structure.
Okay, thanks.
And I mean, I think it is fair to say, I mean, Mr. Chapman and staff internally here are obviously working in terms of how we will continue to work with the region around local government community response to any issues that may occur in the community, and how we continue to all work collaboratively together as we do on a variety of issues in the central part of the city. Okay. Any other questions and answers? Somebody wants to move bylaws for first. Sorry, it's been moved by Councillor Singh, seconded by Councillor Marsh, that leave be given the mover and seconder to introduce the bylaws listed on the agenda, and the same be taken as read a first time and stand referred to Committee of the Whole. All those in favor? Oh, additional bylaws.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have two late starters emanating from the Planning and Strategic Initiatives, one relating to the amended zoning bylaw from this evening, as well as the official plan amendment.
Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I don't know where we are. So when do these tenders get, are we talking about bylaws? Or
No, we'll
tenders?
we'll get to that in a second. Almost there. Councillor Singh is, I've just figured out, Councillor Singh is not in the room, so who cares to move it at the moment? Councillor Galloway-Seelock, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. It's been moved by Councillor Johnson that Council resolve itself into Committee of the Whole. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Johnson, if you can turn yourself on. And
Okay. Can I have a mover, please, for the second reading of the bylaws? Thank you, Councillor Kelly Galloway-Seelock. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Can I have a mover, please, for the tenders? Councillor Michaud.
You have some questions.
Oh.
So Councillor Gazzola first.
Sorry. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I punched in. I was going to move. I have a question on the first one. I'm trying to understand what we're approving here. What are we buying here? Are we buying a program? Like it's divided into capital and operating. So what?
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we are buying a records management system that interfaces with our computer-aided dispatch system, which actually records all our incidents so that we can fulfill reporting requirements, do reporting analysis. That's what we're buying. The capital is to purchase the records management system, and the operating is to maintain it through the 4 years.
What I'm trying to understand, the operating is going to be done by our staff that we already have in place, or are we bringing in new staff to do that?
Oh, no, we're not bringing any new staff in to do this.
So
all the implementation will be through our staff.
Okay, so the other thing we're approving here is the capital expenditure, plus we're saying that the staff are going to be using 88,000 of their operating budget for this. Okay, I had another question on it, and I'm trying to understand. We've brought a firm in to put this into place. Are there any travel costs allowed with the firm, involved with the firm that's doing it? The reason I ask is it's been awarded to a firm from Bellingham, Washington, and we've got firms in Toronto that have bid on it. So is there a big chunk of money for travel for the Washington firm? Or I was trying to find out, how could the Washington firm, if there's a travel involved, bid lower than Toronto firms?
Through you.
Mr. Lonbach?
Through the chair, we don't have that breakdown in terms of what the costs are tonight, but we can confirm that. Understanding is the capital cost that's provided through the bid would be the full cost related to the implementation that's identified as capital.
No, and I can appreciate that, but if they have to allocate a lot of money to travel, are we getting as good a product? That's all. There's less money to go towards the product itself. So, if staff are satisfied, I'm happy with that. I just want to question whether staff are satisfied.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, I had a similar question. Given that we have 3 Canadian companies, I question why we have to go to Bellingham. But beyond that, I understand that Crisis Limited is the system we currently use. Is it not cheaper just to upgrade what we have rather than to bring a brand new system into the fold?
Through the chair, it will cost significant amounts of financials as well to upgrade the system. The current system does not provide the functionality that we may need for the future. As well, Crisis did have an opportunity to come in and present their RMS system, their new release and their upgrade. And through the evaluation process, they didn't score as high as the first successful vendor.
And what are those aspects that they may not contain?
So what I can mention is that the proposals were evaluated on technical components, privacy components, financial components, and the demonstration itself. My understanding is, through their presentation, they were not able to demonstrate the functionality that we require for things like inventory, interfaces with systems that we currently have. So that's why they scored lower than the vendor that is the first vendor here.
Councillor Gazzola?
I have another question on item 3.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. My question, it's to do with the pipelines that we purchased. We will be spending $331,000, and there's $512,000 in the fund. What happens to that big surplus of $181,000? Will we put less money into that account next year? Will we close out that account, that big surplus?
Mr. Nottenbach?
Through the chair, the capital budget that's identified, gas pipelines, it's a larger account that deals with both the installation and the material associated with contracting this type of work. So the surplus will go back to that account. It's an annual amount that's budgeted in the capital budget each year, but it will be retained in the account to proceed with other gas work that's needed throughout the year.
So we won't need to put as much money into that account next year if we've got a surplus sitting there of $181,000.
So through the chair, the tender is based on a fixed price, unit prices, and so it will fluctuate depending on the needs from year to year. You'll see that even from some of the bids that we received, the third bid being $520,000, that pricing can fluctuate as well, and so this budget reflects what we expect on an annual basis to potentially need not only for this type of contract, but other work that might be needed as well to carry it out.
I still submit from the information that you provided as what the annual spend is, that you're going to have substantial dollars left in that account at the end of the year. Fine, I'll watch for it later on in the year. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, is that all the questions?
I have another question on the next.
On the next item under tenders, or?
Okay. Yes, sorry.
All right, go ahead.
It's to do with the Kiwanis Park playgrounds. In reading the staff report, it sets out that they went out to the community to ask them what they desired, not what they required, but what they desired. That's what we do. But it says that the results pointed to a desire for a playground with a combination of traditional freestanding and natural elements. Is one cheaper than the other, less expensive than the other, or how do we decide that? I'm concerned with desire and require are two different things. So we're fulfilling the desire here, or we're fulfilling the required?
Ms. McGoldrick?
So through the chair, for all playground upgrades, we go out to the public in terms of public feedback around design elements. First, it's around broader design elements, looking at accessibility needs, and certainly with Kiwanis Park as a destination site, a citywide park, we would look to incorporate specific required elements related to accessibility, the number of elements related to the amount of use within the park. But then it goes to, then out of those options, then the community has different types of elements that they can choose from as part of the engagement component. And so that's what you're seeing in terms of both required and desired. There's some flexibility in terms of delivering on those required elements that we look for community preferences and take into account in terms of the design.
Okay, are we ready to vote now? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I'll move number 3.
Oh, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we have a mover for, thank you, Councillor Galloway-Seelock. Any questions? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Councillor Gazzola has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Keep going.
Okay.
I have a question on item C, which is for information purposes.
Okay, we need a mover first?
No, there's nothing to approve. It's just, I just want to ask staff.
No, you need a motion to take it out of information to be discussed.
Okay. We need a motion to take that out so we can discuss that.
I move that we take it out.
You're going to move that? Thank you,
If I
Councillor
can.
Gazzola.
I'll second it.
Okay. Okay. Oh, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, go ahead.
I just want to ask staff, for each one of those items, there is a staff report, is there not? That one could go and review? Which, is that correct? There's a whole list of...
Through the chair, that is correct. We do an internal memo related to the awards, and so we are tracking in a very similar format to make sure that these awards are within the criteria to be able to award them through the director.
But is it a public memo that anyone can go and review?
This is the public report that's released in terms of the bylaw and how it states that the information is shared in terms of those awards. It's internal documents that we do have that are available.
Okay. The question I really wanted to ask was, if you could, is it possible to include another column showing what was budgeted for each of those projects? That's obviously part of your report, and would be easy to include that, just to sort of give us an idea of.
Through the chair, it's something that we could consider and take a look at. Given the space on the page, it depends on fitting that all in, but it's certainly something that we could provide.
I'm confident in this day of technology we could squeeze it in. I'll leave that to you.
Move that the committee rise and report.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried?
Yes.
Okay. I'll move that the proceedings on the recorded pecuniary interests and conflicts taken in the meeting of the Committee of the Whole held today as attached hereto and forming part of these minutes are hereby adopted and confirmed.
Seconder, Councillor Schneider. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. It's moved by Councillor Sink, seconded by Councillor Marsh, that the bylaws listed on the agenda for third reading, as well as any additional ones, be taken as read a third time, be finally passed and numbered serially by the clerk. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And it's been moved by Councillor Davey that we now adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried.